I'm in the middle of a bit of a fight on the floor of the House, so I'll have to open and go and then hopefully come back. So if the Deputy Chair doesn't, if the Deputy Chair doesn't turn up, I might hand over to you, Mike, for the Chair's role. So thanks everyone for coming. I declare open this public hearing of the Joint Committee on the National Broadband Network. Before calling the first witnesses, I ask a committee member to move that the media be allowed to film the proceedings today in accordance with the rules set down for committees, which include not taking footage or still images of members' papers or laptop screens. Anyone? Thanks, Dean. The NBN Co and the departments are here to discuss the progress of the NBN rollout for the fourth six-monthly review of the NBN. At 8 p.m, Telstra will appear to cover workforce retraining issues. Since our last hearing, the committee has looked at a similar rollout in New Zealand as part of a parliamentary committee exchange program. We went to Auckland and Wellington and met with various companies engaged in the rollout of ultra-fast broadband, government ministers, members of parliament, trade union members, government and regulatory agencies. It was a valuable experience that will be put into the next report. I note that already some committee members have made useful contributions, including Mr Fletcher, if he is here, whose article was published in The Australian shortly after our return, and Mr Simon in his grievance debate last night. Before starting the hearing, I want to say something about the delays in getting material to the committee. This is not the first time I've raised this matter, and the committee has criticised the government for the lack of timeliness in our reports. The report from shareholder ministers that we're looking at tonight was due at the end of September. This material was not lodged with the Secretariat until the 23rd of October, which is perplexing given that this hearing was originally scheduled for the 8th of October in Sydney. There is also the question of material requested by other members which has still not been received, even after the Secretariat extended the deadline at the department's request when the hearing was postponed. I expect the member concerned will raise this himself tonight. But as there is considerable interest in tonight's proceedings which are being broadcast, I would now like to start the public hearing. I welcome representatives of the NBN Co and officers of the Department of Broadband Communications and the Digital Economy and the Department of Finance and Deregulation. For the Hansard record, would you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee?
Yep. I'm Mike Quigley, Chief Executive Officer of NBN Co. To my left is...
Clive Steffens, Chief Operating Officer of NBN Co.
Robin Payne, Chief Financial Officer, NBN Co.
And Ian Robinson, I'm Acting Deputy Secretary of the Department of Broadband Communications and the Digital Economy.
And Stacey Hall, Acting First Assistant Secretary, Department of Finance and Deregulation.
Philip Smith, Assistant Secretary, Department of Finance and Deregulation.
Okay, well, thanks all for coming. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, I advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament and warrant the same respect as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make an opening statement to the committee?
Well, if you agree, Chair, rather than give the committee a kind of verbal summary of what's been achieved by the company since we last met, I thought it may be more valuable if I table some performance data, which in fact is will complement the six-monthly report that you've been provided by the government and is in fact quite up to date. In fact, we've tried to even extrapolate out to the close of October. So we'll be tabling that if you're in agreement. I also, if I could just mention a couple of things before we do table that information. We were sent some questions, obviously from members, and we have answered those. Some of those I think have been passed on to the committee, some are still with the government. I'd also like to mention for Senator McDonald's benefit, he inquired, I think, at estimates about a letter regarding Julia Creek that he was concerned that I had not responded to. We followed up that letter, and unfortunately, Senator, it was sent to an office in Tasmania that we hadn't occupied for 2 years.
The only address my staff could find for you, Mr.
Right.
Quigley. When I found it, we sent it again to Sydney.
Okay.
But you have answered it, so thank you for that.
We have answered, yep, and it is in fact probably, we invite you to use email in future, Senator, if you'd like to. We can be sure I'll get it then.
Okay.
Okay, I'd also like, if I can, just very quickly, to reiterate a point I've made many times about fixed line technologies and wireless technologies. And the reason I do so again is that there was a comment made on a Sydney radio program in the last week or two that said that the ecosystem of the internet is rapidly changing from fixed line or devices that can be connected to cables, desktop computers, laptops and so forth, to wireless devices. I'd just like to say that we absolutely agree that there is a rapid growth in the use of wireless devices, but we don't agree that the internet is moving away from fixed line technology. I'd like to stress again that it is fixed line technology that is handling the bulk of this wireless data from wireless devices. For example, in the US at the end of 2011, more than 60% of the tablets were Wi-Fi only. Another 25 of the tablets were Wi-Fi and cellular, but the cellular connection was not activated by the owner. So roughly 87% of tablets in the US at the end of 2011 were used only for Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi uses a fixed line connection. That sort of trend is also being seen in Australia, with the latest ABS figures, Australian Bureau of Statistics figures for the end of June, showing fixed broadband data represented 93.9% of the total data downloaded over the 6 months to June. That's an increase from 93.3% from the previous 6 months. So we're seeing a very, very large and growing share of data downloads being carried on fixed line networks in Australia and in other places around the world. So having said that, with the agreement of the Chair, I would now like to table some performance data which my colleagues and myself will talk to, and I think this will be of use to the committee. What we're going to focus on is 3 areas. First of all, on the brownfields fibre deployment performance, and our Chief Operating Officer Ralph Steffens will go through that data. Then our Chief Financial Officer Robin will provide a summary of our position on cost performance for brownfields fibre, fixed wireless, satellite and our transit network build. And finally, I'll address the committee on the greenfields fibre, the new estates, which have got a lot of focus in the last weeks. As I've mentioned before, that is in fact our largest challenge. So if I pass now to Ralph, who will take us through the first chart on FTP brownfields.
Thank you.
Have they been sent around?
You've got them?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't got one. Have you got one, Doug? Doug hasn't got one.
Okay, thank you very much. What you see here on this chart is, is a ramp up, a very, very steep ramp up across all stages in the brownfield development. It is important to note that, we are very early in the development process, and it's important to note that the early stages of the process have improved significantly over recent months. It is true that it has taken a while to get all the systems stood up. It is true that it took a while to get all the interfaces with all the partners established, and the information which we require to build the brownfield network, if that is Telstra information, if it is information from the utilities, or address information, which I think has been addressed in this forum many times before. These interfaces had to be established, and it took a while to get the system environment established, as well as the processes. So you can see at the front end, where we start with the network design, that's a very, very important and complicated stage. And you can see that since the beginning of the year, we have consistently improved our performance to the point where we today release approximately 35 fiber service access modules every single month. The important element.
So you're releasing 35 fibre access service modules per month?
We are releasing network design documents for 35 fibre service access modules. Correct.
Okay, and they cover about 3,000 premises.
They cover actually roughly 2,400 premises. Yes.
And how many have you released cumulatively now?
Cumulative for the end of September, we have released approximately 575,000.
Okay. That's premises?
That is premises,
Yeah,
correct.
okay. But how many fibre service access, did you say modules? Or?
Call it FSAMs.
It's FSAMs, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
good. That's what I thought. Thank God. So you're leading 35 per month, but how many have you released collectively, FSAMs?
Collectively, we have produced network design documents towards for the end of September. We have released 241 to be
today.
precise.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Not a problem. So, what we have seen in recent months is that this trend of 30, 35 is very consistent, and we're producing documents, to the right quality and release them into the construction industry. I think important to note is that if you look at the long-term run rate, the peak run rate, what we call it, which we need to achieve in order to deliver this program over the stated period, at the peak run rate, we need to produce approximately 45, 48 documents every single month, which means we are very, very close to the run rate which we require. And also, if you look 12 months back, 12 months ago, we were producing approximately 2 a month. It just shows the learning curve we have been through collectively with the entire supply chain. And we consider the front end of the process working. We obviously continuously improve the process and try to find ways of doing it more efficiently. But overall, we're releasing design documents at a rate we require to achieve our annual target. If you move on into the next stage where we start the detailed design process, that's actually when construction commences, when the construction partners, the 4 construction partners we have contracted with, go into the field and physically inspect the pit and pipe infrastructure, match this and document this against the network design document, because as we've stated before, address information is not accurate, and address information cannot be entirely trusted to start the connections. So therefore, we go out, we walk every single street, we match every single address, but also importantly, check the infrastructure from Telstra, check every pit and pipe if the pit is fit for use, but also check the fill ratios of the ducts and the usability of the ducts. And that's a process which takes us approximately 3 months. And again, at the beginning, this process took us longer than 3 months because we collectively, with the supply chain, had to learn how to do this in the most efficient way, because there's a huge amount of data which needs to be exchanged between different systems, between the various different companies, and these interfaces had to be established. And I'm also pleased to say that we are in a good state. And if you look at the graph here, the black one is what we've achieved so far. The others are what we are going to forecast for the remainder of the year. We are on track, and we are matching the NDD process very, very closely. There's a gap of about 1 to 2 weeks typically before we commence construction from the release of the NDD.
It's fair to say, I can just interrupt Mr. Stephens, we're in fact doing a very important job here of correcting the national databases. So the GNAF databases, Geocoded National Address File, produced by a government agency, PSMA, we're actually going through and feeding information back to them. This is extremely useful, as you would imagine. Correcting Australia's national address database is a very useful thing to be doing.
So the output of this process, of the 3 months process, and we're getting very, very close to the 3 months timeline. The output of that is a detailed design document which determines exactly the material which needs to be deployed in each pit and in each duct, and but also produces a field inspection report which we hand over to Telstra, where the infrastructure needs to be rectified, which is not usable. So, and you can also see in the next phase, the Telstra commencement notices. We have issued almost 250,000 notices to Telstra, homes, which cover 250,000 homes. And Telstra is well underway in remediating the infrastructure to make it usable for us so that we can deploy our equipment into the Telstra infrastructure.
Sorry, you said 250,000. This document suggests you've given instructions to date in respect of about 600,000.
No.
Well, the black, I'm looking at...
It's the third graph along the terminal, the middle graph.
In the middle.
middle-
Telstra commencement notice.
Where your finger is.
Oh, I see. Oh, right. Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
we are
Got it.
approximately a quarter of a million homes
Thank
have been released, and the time frame for Telstra is on average 3 months to remediate an FSAM. And we have completed 12 FSAMs with many more underway. So this process works really well, and we have a good working relationship with Telstra, and we don't foresee any major issues in going through this stage. At the same time, as we issue these Telstra commencement notices, we also, as a result of this detailed design document, we will have a detailed bill of material as well, on which basis then we do a final construction contract with our delivery partners, who then start the construction, the hauling of the fibre, the splicing, the connectivity of the homes in each fibre serving area. And you can see that is in line with the Telstra commencement notices. So approximately a quarter of a million homes are well underway. And then, so what you see here from all these graphs, there is a steep ramp which we have to work through at each stage of the process. And it's a sequential process, and therefore there's always a lag between each stage. What is very encouraging is that after the initial ramp, we have made all of these process improvements sustainable. So what we see now is a very steady performance month after month. And the last stage, obviously, is to pass the premises to complete these FSAMs and hand them over into operations. And if you look at the forecast we are tabling here, it's the same pattern we are following here with the premises passed. There will be a steep ramp, which will then level out, and we will have then a sustainable run rate. So it's a challenging program. It's a challenging ramp we have ahead of us, but we are confident that all the work is now handed over to the construction partners. The contracts are, the individual FSAM contracts are handed over and contracted, and I have a high degree of confidence in the construction industry to complete these 286,000 homes according to our corporate plan.
We don't have here, Mr. Stephens, a graph of premises activated, the last step.
Yes, that's the, this obviously follows the premises completed, and I can tell you that we have more than 5,000 brownfield premises activated by now, and more than 2,000 greenfield premises.
And by June 13, we've written in our corporate plan that we will achieve 43,000 premises activated on brownfields by June 13. That's what we're going for. But obviously to do that, we've got to reach the 286,000 premises passed. And we continue to be encouraged by the rate of activations. Kaima is now very close to 44% uptake, and Wollonga not far behind it. So it's, we are seeing some quite substantial take-ups without any steps being taken yet to shut down the copper. Perhaps if we could now move on, thank you, Ralph, to, I'll get Mr. Payne to cover on the next chart briefly our brownfields capital cost. And I know there's been interest from the committee in how we're travelling against the cost.
Mr. Quigley, just before we do, Michelle has
So, may I ask a question on some of the comments that were made there? You talked about the quality of the mapping information. So after NBN Co has walked the streets corrected it. In your estimation, how inaccurate would you think the mapping data is that you had at your disposal?
It varies dramatically, not only between the geography, but also between the type of premises. So multi-dwelling units typically are a lot more inaccurate than single-dwelling units are, but it's a significant percentage, but a huge variety between the geographies.
So as a ballpark, would it be 10%
It's
inaccurate or more?
It's tend to be more in rural.
More in rural.
Tends to be more than that, yes.
Yeah, more in rural. By far the worst, the most inaccurate, the most difficult in terms of addressing is new developments, greenfields. You can imagine why. Sometimes they're lots, they've got different names, the names change. It's pretty difficult in addressing issues in greenfields.
And considering that you're doing what I agree is quite a significant job updating that data, is that data that you think will be able to be used in future and we can actually derive some sort of return on that?
Well, our main aim at the moment is to lock in the right data, to build. But it's obviously important that, not only that we lock in the right data, but also we take great care in ensuring that, data integrity is being maintained.
But as a publicly funded company, we didn't want to start trying to charge back the costs of correcting the database. We're just doing it. We're doing it as we go. Likewise, we're correcting the dial before we dig database, because as you would expect, if we have to do any underground work, we can locate a whole bunch of utility services where the pipes are, water pipes, electricity, sewerage, all of that. We provide that information back to the dial before you dig database.
Nevertheless, it's a significant exercise that
It's a
no
big
one would have
exercise.
conducted in
Yep.
decades and no one's going to conduct for quite some time.
Yep, so we're doing that.
Can I just ask too, Mr Quigley, you also mentioned at the beginning the wireless versus fixed arguments, and I believe you were quoting from somewhere. Where were you quoting, or who were you quoting
That was a
from?
radio interview.
And who was the speaker?
It was Mr Turnbull I was quoting.
Yeah, by the way, Mr Quigley, I'm very aware of the point you made.
Good.
And it's the point I was addressing was a somewhat different point. But I mean, we can sort of go through the rituals of having a go at each other. Perhaps you should. You offered to give me a private briefing sometimes.
Be happy to.
Well, I'd love to do that.
Okay.
I'm just waiting for your call. You just let me know when you're available.
Well, I think the protocol is, Mr Turnbull, you have to call me through the minister.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we can
So
do
it
that.
won't be a private briefing. We'll have one of the minister's apparatchiks in the room.
I have to follow the government.
Okay, let's move on.
move on, yeah.
Move on to Mr. Payne. But you don't have to give us lectures about networks. We've all moved beyond that. We just want to get to the facts tonight.
That's what we're trying to do.
Good, that'd be great.
Well, that's good to know, Mr Turnbull, by the way, that the debate about wireless versus fixed is over, I presume, then, from what you
No,
said.
it's, the point. Well, there isn't a debate about the need. The only debate, just so we're very clear, the only debate in terms of the brownfields networks that we're talking about is whether you need to take the fibre into every premise. That is the debate with new generation networks, as you and Mr Steffens know very well, with every country and every telco around the world. And that's a whole different issue. And
That's a different debate,
and
yes.
that is the only debate.
Yep.
As to what devices people use, clearly wireless devices are becoming very dominant,
Absolutely.
particularly video over wireless devices,
Yes.
but do they need to be connected does that signal need to get into the ground, into fibre as quickly as possible? Obviously. Can it all be carried on licensed spectrum? No. So we all agree with that. So we don't need to, re-thrash that point. The real issue is the cost effectiveness of the fibre to the premise.
And we'd be delighted to have that discussion any time you're ready,
Good.
Mr
No,
Turnbull.
every other, that'd be good.
Yep.
That'd be great.
You don't be directed how you should give your evidence. You don't have to be directed by Mr Turnbull.
And quite frankly, that's not the only debate that's
You'd be
here,
better
because
off
there is
being
another
directed by
debate. There is
Senator
another
Cameron over
debate
there,
going
so-
on about
Well,
a proposition.
After
There's
that
a
little
proposition
performance,
around
I want to be
that faster.
directed by you.
There's a proposition around that faster broadband can be more affordably and more swiftly delivered through a competitive market than using the NBN. Like, that's another proposition going around, and they're the words of the Leader of the Opposition. So, anyway, I won't
Okay, shall we move to the
hold you up
costs
anymore.
per premise of
Right.
LNDN?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. So we're looking at the slide titled FTTP Brownfields LNDN Capital Expenditure. And just to be clear what we're talking about, this is the local and distribution network, which is the part of the network which goes from the fan site, which is typically the Telstra Exchange building, down the street, past every house, to the pit or the pipe outside the end user's premises. And this is what you can see in the centre of the diagram that you've got at the bottom half of that page. And as you can imagine, this is the part of the network that makes up the single largest component of our forecast $37.4 billion capex in the period to 2021, and it covers about 150,000 kilometres of street distance, so it's a very significant part of the network. Just turning to the chart at the...
Ask a question, Mr Payne.
Sure.
What's the typical distance between the fan and the beginning of the lead-in conduit, or which I guess is the curb?
That might be a better one for... within an FSAM?
Within a fan or FSAM, yeah.
Go from a few hundred metres to 12 kilometres.
12 is the limit, yes.
Yeah, that's the limit. But what's the average we're talking about in the cities? A couple of kilometres or...
You're probably looking at 6 kilometres, I'd say, on average, because it tends to be, as the distance goes out, you're picking up more premises.
Okay, thank you.
So if we just turn to the chart at the top, what this is showing is the average cost per premise passed for that portion of the network, so for the NBN portion of the network. And what we can see there is, starting on the left-hand page and working across to the right, we've got the cost per premise for the initial pre-release sites we did in Tasmania, the Stage 2 Tasmania sites, and the first 5 sites we did on the mainland. And at the right-hand side, we've got what we have in the corporate plan for FY13, so the year we're in at the moment. And there's 3 things I'd really like to draw out to the committee's attention. The first is obviously the significant reduction we've seen over the sites we've already done from the first sites in Tasmania to now. And this is... We're not publishing those numbers. This is to scale, but we're not. I don't have the precise numbers with me.
Okay, so we can get out our ruler.
You could get a ruler and deduce, but I don't have the precise numbers.
Surely, I mean, that's a bit silly, isn't it? I mean, can't you... So you're saying that we should get out a ruler and work out the relationship of the white column with $1,500 to these 3 black columns?
Maybe we should ask why they're not being... There's probably a reason why they're not being...
I think the important number, if I can, Mr Turnbull, is if you look at what's very important for the committee is the number on the right. Obviously, what's important is it's come down substantially. There's low numbers to start with. The number on the right is we are saying our corporate plan, as you can see in the yellow there, we are saying, given our best estimate now, given all the data we have, we are confident that we're going to come in for FY 2013 between $1,200 and $1,500 for this component of the cost per premise passed, which is consistent with the data you would have seen in New Zealand.
And I think the Chorus from New Zealand have fairly recently published data showing their cost per premise falling from around 3,300 last year to 2,700, 2,900 this year, and they're targeting, I think, around $1,200 to $1,500 in the long run.
Is the bottom of the bar 0?
Bottom of the bar is 0, yes, it is to scale, so yes.
Good, just wanted to check.
Yes, it is. And so the point I want to make out of this is one, that the trend we're seeing is exactly what we expected to see, what we always said we'd see, which is obviously the first sites. One, we were using totally different architecture, totally different construction processes, contracting processes and so on, and obviously very little volume in the early sites. So the big story out of here is that as we move into full-scale production or construction, as Ralph has alluded to, we get the benefits of that scale. That's what we assumed we'd see in the corporate plan, and that's what reality is, what these figures are suggesting is actually going to happen when we get these parts of the network built.
Well, just to be clear, the only reality you've got here is about $3,000. Looks like a bit more than that. And then the rest of it is what you hope to be at the end of 2013.
No, it's not a hope. It's a
Is it
estimate that the company is prepared to back.
Or not?
We have achieved a certain number of FSAMs are built.
Is it in your plan or is it actually delivered?
Some of it is actually delivered, as you heard from Mr. Steffens. We have some FSAMs, but we are not prepared to give a precise number or to fill it in black until we have a larger quantity done. That's why we put some confidence limits around it, but I think the committee can be assured we're on track to hit the corporate plan number. And we're prepared to back that.
Can I
Mr. Fletcher.
follow-up question on that? Mr. Payne, if I'm right, if you say by the end of June 2013, you will have passed 256,000 premises in brownfields.
286,000.
256.
256.
86.
Well, it says 256 here.
We've already done 30.
Incremental.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Incremental.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So, and you say will have cost about $1,200 per premise.
12 to 1,500 for those 256 premises.
Okay. We'll call that $400 million. Is that fair enough? Roughly.
It's probably a bit lower than that, but yeah.
Well, okay. Well, by June 13, according to your plan, what's your cumulative capex going to be on fibre to the premises?
Fibre to the premises, it'll be in the corporate plan. So for the fibre and the transit network, about $1.6 billion. So that, remember, we're just looking at a portion of the of the fibre network. We're not looking at Customer Connect. We're not looking at the transit network. So we're only looking at a portion of it here.
We will talk about the transit.
We'll talk about the transit bit, and obviously Customer Connect, it's a little early to talk about. But if you're trying to reconcile it, this is only a portion of that total cost. And obviously
if you were, because, this is very, really appreciate you pulling this number out, but what is the cost per premise passed, including a fair allocation of the transit network?
We'll provide that. What we'll do, Mr Turnbull, is I think progressively provide more information to the committee as we get sufficient data that says this is how it looks. The corporate plan is our best estimate that we've got now. Of all the elements, and what we're saying is, here is this LNDN element, very important part. We are confident that we're going to be between $1,200 and $1,500. What we would have to do is an exercise of allocating the transit network, and as we've said from the beginning, we are building the transit network out well ahead of the access network because it's a big job. It's needed for fixed wireless, it's needed for satellite, so you can't take the amount we've spent on transit and then divide it by the number of premises we passed. It's not a valid piece of arithmetic.
Mr Payne, I'd just like to ask, you mentioned Chorus before, and I was part of the delegation to New Zealand. They gave us a figure of between 2,200 and 2,400 per premise passed in year 2, but then said it only drops slightly below that each year beyond, yet the NBN seem to be getting a much better return the more premises you're passing. Is there a particular reason you're aware of for that?
Look, I think scale obviously has something to do with it, and probably the density, the size of the construction.
There is one other thing, Rob. We need to make sure we're comparing apples with apples. The one thing that we found, and we have sat down with folks from Chorus, we're having the experts for 2 days twice. You need to when you're doing these kind of comparisons, you need to go through them line by line to really make sure you're comparing apples with apples. You can fool yourself very easily by talking about gross numbers if you don't know what it is you're comparing. We've been through with Chorus in a huge amount of detail. What we're confident to say is we are confident we'll be by the end of FY13 at where Chorus wants to be long term for the LNDN component.
And I think it's also more just the shape of the curve we're both seeing as much as the absolute dollars. They're going through exactly the same experience that we are, and every big major network construction company around the world sees similar things. You start off up here and work your way down to where you want to be.
Your figures would seem to bear that out. The other thing that I also learned in New Zealand was that premise passed is really only a termination box at the front gate of a premise rather than actually on the building. With that in mind, your figures probably look a little bit better still, because there's still more work to be done in New Zealand with chorus after a premise is passed.
Well, this is as the diagram shows, this is just up to the pit in the street or the box outside the house. That part of it is reasonable. Yeah.
Thanks for clearing that up.
About how you get to the number of premises. When you're talking about premises passed, does that include premises in MDUs? I mean, if your cable is going down the street and it passes a block of apartments, does it include all the premises in that block of apartments? Yes. Have you worked out how you're going to connect the MDUs? No?
Yes, we're working on this. We are connecting.
You haven't worked it out yet. You're working on it.
We are working on this. There is no right answer to this. Every MDU looks different. There is not one method of connecting MDUs, and installation methodologies do evolve rapidly. Therefore, what we do today will also change over time, because there will be more efficient ways of doing this. But no, we're connecting MDUs today.
So, Mr. Stephan, just to be clear, so what you're saying is, with MDUs, which is about a third of the brownfield target, you haven't yet worked out how you're going to connect those premises?
We are connecting MDUs today.
But on your forward projections, what figures are you using for those?
In terms of cost or methodology?
Yes.
We're using figures, which we experience today, and then there will be obviously opportunities further in the future. But you also need to bear in mind that the average number of premise per MDU in Australia is 9. So what you talk about is often here, for instance, a block of townhouses is often considered an MDU. If you have 10 townhouses, these are basically 10 individual SDUs, but are labeled an MDU potentially. And small apartment blocks where you have 4, 5, 6 units in a block, it's labeled an MDU. But the installation methodology would be very, very similar, if not the same as an SDU. And then obviously you have the very big blocks where you have 50, 100 or more units in it, and then every MDU is an individual design, because every premise will look different.
Are you considering? You've said publicly that you're going to run fibre into every apartment, in effect, every unit in an MDU. What will you do if that is not possible, given perhaps the attitude of the body corporate or the lack of space in the risers? What will you do?
If the body corporate doesn't agree, ultimately, we'll obviously try and convince them to accept the installation. If ultimately the body corporate says no, we declare that building frustrated and move on.
What about, Mr. Stephens would be familiar with what BT is doing with MDUs there. Perhaps you could explain the approach they're taking in Britain.
Well, it's a wide array. There's a wide array of different methodologies which is being used in Britain. For the FTTP deployment in the UK, which BT clearly stated that at least 25% of the premises they pass are going to be fibre to the premise.
I think it's now 10% actually. But, yeah.
Well, it's still 25%, the publicly stated number. And they would go through a very similar process as we are going through.
Well, my understanding is that what your former colleagues are doing there is we've got two solutions for MDUs. One is to put a cabinet in the basement and use the existing copper technology, and with the larger, newer blocks of apartments where they have Cat5 or better cable, they put a higher spec device in the basement. Now, are you going to consider that option as in circumstances, where it's not possible or cost-effective to run the fibre into every apartment?
We queued on the government, the objectives set by the government.
So the answer to that question is no?
The answer is no. We've
So-
been directed to provide fibre to the premise, and that's what we're doing.
So even if Body Corporate wrote to you and said, we don't want you to put fibre through to every apartment, but we'd like you to connect into the basement and run through the copper in the existing risers, you'd say, no, the government won't let us do that.
We don't have a product. To actually do that would need a different set of technologies, which we would have to qualify. We'd need a different product set because we could no longer provide the tiered products of different speeds with guarantees that we can provide on fibre. It would have to be best effort because we wouldn't know the state of the copper. So we'd have to go back to the ACCC, it would have to be put into the SAU, into our WBAs. It would be a big process. It doesn't mean it can't be done, it just means it would be quite a step. We would need directions from our shareholder to tell us that's what they want us to do.
But this is a big deal, really, because as you know, I mean, MDUs are can be very problematic.
Yes.
I mean, you understand that, and that's an issue everywhere in the world. What you're saying is that even if it were more cost effective to have a cabinet in the basement and hook into the copper LAN in the building, which, if it's Cat 5, as Mr Steffens would know from his British experience, would enable you to get FTTP-like speeds anyway, even if you can do that and it's quicker and more cost-effective, you're saying that is not available. They either get, if the fibre cannot, for one reason or other, get into every premise, then they get nothing.
Well, we expect, we frankly anticipate not a large number of MDUs to be declared frustrated. We think most body corporates will say, this is a good thing, go ahead and install it. Now, we may have some, we expect there'll be some, to introduce a new technology to do that when our shareholder hasn't told us to do that. We just can't do that. So it's not an option we have before us, Mr Turnbull.
Mr Cameron, got some questions?
You answered the question.
Yeah, sure. I want to come back to this issue of the copper and the argument that we should use copper. After our visit to New Zealand, Chorus actually said they would not be running any new copper anywhere. They also said that they would actually cannibalise their old copper system and that they would eat up their own network by putting out the fibre. They raised a number of issues with copper, and I'm wondering if these are the same issues we have here. They said that they use pressurised copper in many areas, and that it's extremely expensive to deal with pressurised copper. When they've had natural disasters and problems, the pressurised copper is usually the first to go, and it causes huge communication problems, and that the fibre was much better in terms of reliability in emergencies or other natural disasters. So I'm just wondering, is that the same issue here for copper? They are saying that their copper is deteriorating, and it gets to a situation where they have to just do either renew the copper or move to fibre, and they're going to go fibre. So is that, can you just explain why they would run that line?
Generally, and Ralph can certainly comment on what I'm saying, but I think that's, Senator, it's clearly that's the same trend worldwide over. That it's now well established that the costs of maintaining copper are well above the costs of maintaining fibre. Reliability is much higher on fibre. There's lots of different types of copper in the network. Paper filled, jelly filled, a whole range. Some aluminium, some direct buried, some in conduit, some in ducts. It's hard to generalise other than to say, in general, copper maintenance costs are rising, particularly in those places where you have damp conditions and you're subject to wet weather. So, Ralph, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, pressurised ducts were rolled out, I think, widely probably in the 60s and the 70s, in order to extend the life of the copper, in order to keep the environment basically out of the duct. And that is very, very difficult to maintain, especially as the infrastructure deteriorates, because as you can imagine, it's pressurized. The smallest leak means, that you lose it. And so the maintenance costs are even higher than for ducts which are not pressurized. But in general, yes, I mean, and I unfortunately can only talk about probably more about Europe than Australia in terms of my experience. Copper is naturally deteriorating at a rapid rate due to the capital intensity of that type of business, and telecommunication companies, around the world, being capital constrained as most companies are. And if I look at the availability numbers around copper versus fiber, you typically look at a ratio of 7:1 in terms of availability. That's my experience in Europe, and that's been, and my expectation would be that unless you invest heavily into additional copper, maintaining the copper, you would that ratio would probably get worse.
Yeah, Chorus took us to a suburb called Churton Park, Churton Park. You're probably not aware of it. It's a suburb that's got 3 different levels of NBN, of broadband. One is the old pay TV cables that were put in. So they showed us in one street, they've got the pay TV cables. The other is where they've upgraded the copper and gone fibre to the node. And the other was where they've actually built now another cabinet, which has got the fibre in the cabinet. And they're basically saying that if you go fibre to the node, the issues for the cabinetisation are quite difficult at times as well. You have to be able to cool the cabinet. They indicated to us the cabinets were custom designed, quite expensive, and you had to cool the cabinet. You had to have power to the cabinet to make sure that during a power cut, you had to have power to the cabinet to run it, but when there was a power cut, they've got generators in some of the cabinets.
Batteries.
They've got batteries as well, but after a period of time, in remote areas, they've then got to use generators to run power. So it seems to me it's a very complex, not a simple thing just to go fibre to the node and put it in cabinets out on the street. It's not as simple as that, is it?
It's a significant activity. You have active components out in the field which drive maintenance issues and cost, and but the issue really starts with placing the cabinet in the first place, and we experience this in the greenfields at the moment because our network is not out there, so we have to build, if you like, a mini node on the development, ideally on the development, and we are getting quite a fair bit of pushback, typically from the developer, to have this cabinet outside their development, because they do not necessarily want a cabinet on site due to the space it takes up and the visual impact.
So a little like the mobile tower issue.
And so yes, that is an issue. And then obviously power. You need to power these cabinets, and the time it takes and the cost to get power to the cabinet can be very long. And I think we talked about the UK a few times. That's maybe a good example as well. If you look at a suburb in London, Chelsea and Kensington, which are an upmarket environment area in the UK, they rejected every single cabinet because of visual impact.
The other issue that was raised after we came back from New Zealand was that New Zealand were actually doing the rollout by private sector, and that makes it much more efficient than the NBN rollout. Have you got any comment on that position?
I think, as Ralph mentioned, we are employing the private sector to do the rollout. We've now, as Ralph said, we've issued the contract instructions. We've done the design. We've had that detailed design, issued contract instructions. It is with our 4 large private sector construction partners to do the build. We're confident, by the way, that they are going to deliver on the 286,000 by June of next year. It is largely in their hands now, and it is the private sector who's doing this. And that's routine, by the way. Very few telcos these days anywhere in the world have their own workforces that do this type of work. They don't build the networks themselves.
the private sector people were saying that they had some issues as well with the rollout. I'm interested to get a comparison in Australia. Chorus were saying that it was very difficult to manage the rollout across some of the areas that they were dealing with. They had underestimated the scale of the rollout. That there was a large civil component to the rollout. That there was competition for resources for drilling crews and jointers. They said that there was many local council issues. They said that utility strikes were frequent. And they said that the unforeseen circumstances were because utility records were not accurate. And the design from head office sometimes didn't reflect the topography of the area that they were dealing with. Is that a similar challenges that you guys face?
Yes, I think you could describe an average day.
An average day.
We're dealing with all of those issues and at a different scale, as any other telco, and at a scale which I think is probably an order of magnitude greater here.
I assume then that you've got management systems in place to deal with these issues?
We have.
Can I just...
Hang on, Michelle.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Can I ask, please, how many MDUs have you been completely frustrated and been unable to get access to provide a service?
Frustrated in a single MDU.
Not one.
None?
None so far.
Right, okay. And also, this may not be relevant to the LNDN CapEx figures, but you will note that yesterday there were some media reports from the New South Wales government about costs of accessing poles and wires for the rollout. Can you set the record straight, please, on what has been reported, where I understand that the New South Wales government is seeking significantly more in terms of access to power poles, and is that relevant to specific geographic areas?
Yes, this is for New South Wales.
All of New South Wales?
Pardon?
All of New
All
South
of New South Wales. We were directed by the New South Wales government to negotiate through them rather than directly through to the energy companies themselves. So the government was representing all three energy providers in New South Wales because there's been some changes in the industry there, as you know, amalgamations. We started those negotiations back in November 2010, along with the negotiations with all the other utility providers around the country. We have reached agreement with everybody else, but we could not reach commercial agreements with the New South Wales power companies. We would have liked to. We did everything possible, but the costs were multiples of what we were paying to the others. The terms and conditions were simply unacceptable, I think, as our job on behalf of the government and the taxpayer is to make sure we're not spending more than we believe we should. And we would have been happy to pay the New South Wales utilities what is in line with what we're paying in other parts of the company, but we couldn't reach agreement. So we've fallen back on Schedule 3, which is a well-established process. And we're now following that process of Schedule 3. So we hope and we sincerely hope that the utilities, we can now form a good working relationship with them on the basis of the Schedule 3 process. And that's the notification we've served on them now. And we've done that, by the way. There's a number of what's called land access notices that we've done for rails and roads. So it's a well-known process, the Schedule 3 process. That's what we're falling back to, and we hope to come with a good outcome. And now it's simply a question of if there is a dispute about any particular job, it will go to the Ombudsman, who will decide what is fair compensation. And we're perfectly comfortable with that process. We'd have preferred to strike a commercial deal, but we couldn't get there.
Is there somewhere we could find what you're paying each utility in each state for their power poles? Is there a site you could refer us to, or can you get us?
We have signed non-disclosure agreements at the insistence of the other utilities, so we can't divulge those numbers. But what I can tell you, it is what New South Wales were asking of us was a multiple.
No, well, I was interested in what you were actually paying in Queensland, but you're saying that's not available.
We can't publish that because we're under non-NDAs.
But by the power companies?
Yes, we've agreed with the power companies that they asked us to sign NDAs, we signed them.
They asked you?
I believe so. I have to check that.
Well, could you check that?
Yeah.
It seems unusual. I can't think why they'd be
That's
shy
not surprising.
about
I mean,
that.
that's a commercial arrangement between two companies. You normally wouldn't make public a commercial arrangement.
I've never seen that disclosed.
Sorry?
I've never seen that amount disclosed.
What,
for any
for public
carriers.
companies?
Well, they're not all public companies.
For government companies, government owned.
And private companies.
It's a private company.
So what's the great secret about what you charge for your poles?
Well, why don't you ring the private
Why don't you ring the private companies and ask them then?
Well, I'm asking Mr Quigley to tell me rather than me doing that. He has more staff than I.
He's answered you.
I'm afraid I can't. So it's for understandable reasons. These are a mixture of public companies and private companies, and they've asked us not to divulge the commercial arrangements.
Malcolm?
Just, I want to come back to the CapEx, but just, Mr Quigley, this is just to get the record right. I think, I make no criticism of you, but the quotation of mine, the interview of mine that you made was, what the material that was given to you was rather selective and it created a very misleading impression. The full quote is this, and I'll just put this on the record and we can move on. What I said was, well, this, meaning the NBN, is entirely a fixed line network they are building, and it will support wireless devices in the sense that, you know, if you've got your iPad or smartphone at home, it will run off your Wi-Fi at home. And then I went on to utter the words that you quoted, which of course, which went on to say, you're dead right, the ecosystem of the internet is rapidly changing from fixed line devices that can be connected to cables, desktop computers, laptops and so forth, to wireless devices. But whoever gave you that second sentence did so presumably because they wanted to create the impression that I wasn't aware that the NBN supported wireless devices.
No,
but
I think they were more concerned that the person who was interviewing you, how they represented what you said, Mr Turnbull.
No, this is my... You quoted me my words,
but, But our problem is that when you use those quite clear words in an interview, the person who's interviewing you then subsequently draws conclusions from it which represent fixed line as being dead.
Oh no, well the words, as you'd agree, the words are entirely accurate and very clear.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Good. Okay. Well, we are ad idem, as the Romans would say. Now, back to the Germans, yep. Mr. Stefan. Oh, sorry, Mr. Payne. Actually, is the one I wanted to raise with CapEx. Yep. Mr. Payne, you've got cumulative CapEx to June 21 for FTTP, and this is from exhibit page 75 of your corporate plan, of 28,478 million. Right. You've got cumulative fixed wireless and satellite CapEx of 3,132 million, mm-hmm. and cumulative shared CapEx of 5.7 billion. Yep. Now, what we've done, and I'll just tell you what we've done, and you can tell us where we've got it wrong. We have allocated the shared CapEx as to 90% to the FTTP part of the equation, which would give the fully allocated cumulative CapEx to June 21 for FTTP of 33.678 billion. And on that basis, on the basis of that fully allocated CapEx, the CapEx per FTTP premise, that's fibre premise passed, is $2,760. Now, does that sound about right to you?
That's probably in the ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's quite a lot more than $1,200, isn't it?
Yeah, we're talking about the LNDN.
Yeah, okay. No, it's just important.
And
yeah.
that is, yes,
okay.
It is important. That is just the LNDN.
Yeah,
and as we said before, transit, customer connect.
Yeah, no, I understand, but it's just part. This page just deals with part of the pie.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, I'm not clear. Maybe you could explain that a bit more on how the difference between the 2 points that Mr. Turnbull's raising.
Well, the bits that we were talking about earlier on in relation to the LNDN, that's the bit that we're saying is for this year coming in, we think, at between 1,200 and 1,500, and obviously continuing that downward trend in future years. That is the biggest single part of the overall fibre build, in fact, the overall build of the NBN, but there are other significant bits such as the customer connect, so the cost of connecting 8.5 million customers over the life of the project, that is a significant chunk as well, and that is part of the CapEx bucket that you referred to earlier, Mr Turnbull. There's also the transit network, which is a little bit unusual in the case of NBN, because that's, if you're an incumbent telco, you typically have a transit network. We obviously don't have one, so we have to build one, and that also is a significant part of our cost, which is part of that transit and fibre total cost.
Okay, look, I apologise. Oh, sorry, you go.
The number that you quoted there, Mr Turnbull, is absolutely consistent with the sorts of numbers that we've seen around the world as we benchmarked. What we were comparing is the LNDN, and we thought it was important since the committee had been to New Zealand. We've done a detailed comparison with our colleagues in New Zealand, so we can give you that comparison with the numbers that were being quoted by them. But the overall number of between $2,500 and $3,000 per premise passed on a worldwide basis for everything, including the transit, the customer connect, the whole works, the LNDN, is consistent with worldwide benchmarks.
That's, you said that, but I have to say the figures that I've, been advised of from in continental Europe, for example, are much, much lower than that. Literally hundreds of euros. Several hundred
euros
to pass premises, yeah.
To pass and connect.
Well, the figures I've been given in France and Spain are in the order of 200 euros to pass and a similar sum, perhaps a little more, to connect.
Can't buy the equipment for that.
Okay, but Malcolm, you might like to feed it in as a question.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pass on to those companies what you've said, and I'll find out. We'll see what they say.
Mr Steffens has been one of them
sure.
recently.
No, I understand that. Okay.
But also feel free to pass it into the Secretariat, and we can test it by these guys.
No, and it's important to get a better understanding of this.
Yeah. I apologise. I was in a debate on the floor of the House, so I missed the first part of this. The Deputy Chair has some questions. Mike, you've got some questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Who else is still waiting? So Paul.
Mr Quigley, I want to go back to this issue with polls in New South Wales, because there's some things that I need explained in language that maybe I and more people can understand. The first one is, I've read the quote in the newspaper that the State Finance Minister in New South Wales says the cost for an electricity company to have it installed is between $60 and $80 per pole. And I'm really wondering, what is the cost? What is the real estate that you put on the pole that actually costs the electricity company?
We put, obviously, fibre on the pole, but we pay, and this is, I'm describing to you what we do with all the other utilities, we pay them a monthly pole rental for the use of that pole, and if they have to do anything to the pole to make it ready, what we call make ready, we pay for that also. And that's what we're offering to do with New South Wales. So this, in fact, was a revenue stream of several $100 million over a 20-year period that New South Wales we would have paid New South Wales, and we would have paid for all the costs of installing the fibre and any repairs they had to do to the pole. Now, obviously, if the pole was starting to rot or whatever, that's their responsibility, as they have to maintain their pole. So we're at a loss to know why this would cost them anything. This is, in fact, a revenue line for them. And that's the way the other... since December, we've spent hours and days on this, but the issue is that it's a kind of a whole of government, and it needed the consensus agreement of the Department of Finance, the Department of Premier and Cabinet, New South Wales Treasury, Transport New South Wales, and the three energy companies.
So let's be clear, New South Wales makes money out of signing an agreement with you.
We believe so. That's what the other utility... We're offering them the same deal as, in fact, slightly more than the others if we got to close the deal. But we weren't prepared to pay the multiples of what the others are paying.
Just following up with that, and the point you make, I think, is very, to me, sounds very reasonable. If it's the case that NBN is paying the state or the state power companies money to use the poles, and a substantial amount, how could that affect electricity prices?
Hopefully electricity prices will go down. It's getting another revenue line.
Yeah.
It's hardly a question, but
this-
I can't imagine if you're getting more revenue.
The reason I asked the question is because we've had that from the New South Wales government say that power prices will go up because you're using their assets, and from the evidence you've just given, it would seem to me that they're actually going to go the other way.
And sorry, to quote, if I can please, Mike, the Minister, the New South Wales government can simply not accept such terms which would mean families subsidising the NBN through their electricity bills. What do you say to that?
I frankly went out with a press release today. I thought the suggestion that by the New South Wales government was simply wrong. We went on the public record to correct it. We were going to pay the New South Wales government or the entities owned by the New South Wales government, several $100 million over 20 years, and we were carrying the cost. Now, are there some overheads in us putting applications in and then responding to them, and the work we've got to do on the specifications to make sure that we're complying with their specs? But all of the work of stringing up the fibre, all of the work of if a pole has to be replaced because they think the weight loading on the pole is over their specs, we pay for the replacement of the pole. So we were prepared to do all of that.
So is it correct for this committee to conclude from the fact that you haven't reached an agreement with the New South Wales government entities that it is NBN Co's view that those entities are gouging?
I wouldn't use those.
No, but hang on. I want to hear what is the conclusion you would say. If it is not gouging, what is it? Please.
You're asking for an opinion from the witness, which in Senate committee hearings you're not allowed to
Senate
ask.
committee hearing, no senator. I'm sure you know that.
Well, I'm saying in Senate committee hearings you don't allow.
So there was a question asked.
You don't allow opinion.
Get an answer.
You don't allow opinion.
I am asking for the conclusion that we should draw.
Yes, yeah.
The only conclusion I would suggest that the committee would call that we could not reach commercial agreement because NBN Co were not prepared to pay multiples of what we were paying to other utilities.
And how would you define that, Senator McDonald? I ask in jest.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
you don't have to answer.
Perhaps I could ask a factual question on the same line. And it's what I was asking about before. Could you show me in your corporate plan where you have identified a figure on what you anticipate to pay the power companies for your lines over whatever period you have?
No, we don't have that level of detail in the corporate plan.
To what Telstra and Optus pay for their HFC networks?
I think that was in a different era, I believe. No, I'd have to check the record on this. I believe it's substantially less than what we offer.
So what is can I hang on, Senator McDonald?
You offered more, substantially.
Paul,
the world's...
I'll throw to you for questions. Yeah. Can we just clarify what is your strategy now? Please, I asked before, please. What is your strategy now with New South Wales in light of this impasse?
We've moved to what's called Schedule 3, which is a well-defined process. We've used it for applications to roads authorities, for rail authorities. It's well established under the Act, Telecoms Act, and that's the process we'll go through. And in the end, it relies on the telecoms industry ombudsman to make a decision if the two parties can't reach an agreement.
Okay, Mike, do you have any further questions on that?
I just do have one, and that is again relating to our delegation to New Zealand. Last month we met with a company called North Power in Manukau, and they're doing the rollout in a city called Whangarei in the north of New Zealand, and it's an overhead rollout in the main. They own the poles, they own the electricity wires, and they own the fibre. And they said to us, to paraphrase, that really it was very little extra cost at all because most of the asset was already there. And in terms of extra weight, they also said that the fibre was negligible in just about every case they'd come across. I know what you said before, that there may be cases where your equipment would cause a pole to then be overloaded. How rare would those cases be? It must be a substantial piece of equipment.
Yes, it's. I mean, we stick by the specifications that the utilities ask us, and they are conservative, but we abide by those, and we make sure if in fact we're going to overload a pole, we accept that we're going to have to make the poles ready, whatever that takes. In some cases, it may be a replacement pole, it may be some additional guy wires, We bear the cost of doing that because it's our facilities that are going onto those poles.
And just finally, could you give the committee some idea of the weight or mass involved of a fibre cable being run on poles compared to HFC?
Off the top of my head, I don't know how many grams per metre a cable is. Do you remember?
No, I don't have the exact number for that. We would need to find out.
A percentage, possibly?
No.
Happy to take it on notice.
Yeah, we'll take it on notice.
Thank you.
We can find that data, yes. So.
Deputy Chair, do you have questions?
Yeah, I just want to clarify just how much of the NBN build is aerial compared to using the Telstra system, the pipes and
Best
pits.
estimate at the moment is 25% of the build will be aerial, but that could vary. Until we've done all of the designs, I think the designs at the moment are coming in a little less than that.
They're coming below 25%. But again, I mean, it's early days.
And just one more on the power stuff. I know you said you've settled agreements with other power utility companies. How many of those have you settled in different states and territories?
I think it's 16, 13 or 16, I can't remember
I
off
think
the
it's
top of my head.
13.
Yeah, we'll get that to you. But just I mean, as far as I'm aware, we don't have any outstanding agreements other than with the 3 New South Wales utilities. We've reached agreement with everybody else.
Anything else?
No, I think that should
Paul?
cover.
Thank you.
Just a question, Mr. Steffens, I think to follow up on what you were saying earlier. You spoke about the sequence of steps. I want to know at what point do you place orders for the fibre itself? Does that depend upon the design having been completed? The physical fibre?
The physical fibre, that is order is actually placed by the delivery partner, by the construction company, and they order this in time to complete their schedule.
But does the detailed design have to have occurred first?
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Well, just if I can say, it's up to the our construction partners. They may choose, they know what they've got going, they may choose to hold some, but in general, they order it to be delivered to site. So it's generally after the design's done.
Does it have to be designed to meet the configuration of the particular street and the location of the premises?
Well, it depends. You know, for the underground build, you know, they are very generic materials. You know, in terms of the fibre we are deploying. For the aerial, that is fairly bespoke.
It's bespoke, so
For
it
the,
can't.
only for the aerial, not for the underground.
It can't be ordered until the detailed design is
You
completed.
cannot order bulk, if you like, up front.
Right. So that's an additional step in the process, presumably. Ordering the fibre.
Well, that's part of, you know, as we issue the final contract instruction, the delivery partner is ordering their material accordingly if they haven't, you know, stocked material accordingly beforehand for the underground build.
And how's that going? Is that a choke point?
It's not a choke point today, no.
Has it been a choke point in the past?
It hasn't been a choke point in the past.
I'd like to ask you about the IT systems, the OSS and BSS. How is that going? I'll ask you, Mr. Quigley, if I may.
Well, it actually reports into Mr. Steffens, so he's probably best placed to answer.
I mean, it's the important part is that the basic functionality we have stood up, and that is going really well. So we're having all the functionality required to build the network to connect customers. That doesn't mean that you, as you know, continuously develop system capability and try to automate volume process because some of the.
Okay, so are the OSS and BSS systems complete?
No, they are not complete, and I would never expect them to be complete.
Okay. Your former Chief Information Officer, Claire Rollins, left NBN in August, I believe.
That's correct.
What was the reason for her departure?
We don't comment on particular personnel, Mr. Fletcher. We never talk about why people join or leave. That's just, we don't do that.
What was the original budget for establishing the IT platforms to support the rollout of NBN?
We'd have to take that one on notice. I don't know off the top of my head. But the one thing I can absolutely tell you, when we redid the corporate plan from December 2010 to the one we produced in August of this year, we certainly increased the budget for IT. That was one of the OPEX increases that we made. As you would well know, this is the Achilles heel, the bane of the existence of most telcos is their OSS BSS systems. They're always difficult.
Was the original figure 240 million?
I don't know.
Can you take that on notice?
We can, yes.
Have you recently conducted an internal review which has identified a figure of 1.5 billion that will be required?
No.
No.
Have you recently conducted an internal review of the amount that will be required for the OSS and BSS?
We continuously review our programs, as every diligent company would.
What is the amount you now expect to spend to stand up the OSS and BSS systems?
That's part of the corporate plan.
There's no one answer to that, Mr. Fletcher, because you are constantly looking at functionality. And, for example, in the build, if we identify another piece of functionality that could save us money, we will spend money in IT to save much more in the construction process. And that's what we found. For example, we have had to do a lot more work on getting these addressing and database systems to align than we thought. Now, just on your question, is it possible that somebody thought that we would agree to spend 1.5 billion on IT? They might have, but we would never have agreed to that.
But not a number I've ever heard, by the way.
Yes.
The IT systems, the OSS and BSS systems, are being provided by a range of contractors, is that right?
We're working with a number of partners together, if that's what you mean.
And that includes IBM and Alcatel and Accenture, is that right?
It's Prime is IBM.
Okay.
And they have a number of subcontractors beneath them.
And is there a percentage split between management fees or consultancy fees being charged to those companies' overheads as opposed to amounts that are specifically going into system design?
Sorry, can you repeat his question?
Yeah. What effectively is the amount of money that is going to those companies as contract management fees, and what is going into the specific design of the systems?
Yeah, no, we're not contracting on that basis. We're not paying management fees, overhead fees as such to our delivery partners.
We've got a relationship with IBM as the prime contractor, but that's to be the systems integrator. They take overall responsibility for delivering the functionality that we specify. We ultimately tested in our NOC, our test laboratory in Melbourne, down in Docklands, but they have the requirements from our specification to do the coding and to integrate various components from different companies and deliver to us a working piece of software.
Thank you. Can I ask you about the sale of fibre backhaul? Is that a product that you offer to other telcos?
It is not.
And why is that?
Well, we've focused on our access products. I believe, and I'll check with my colleagues from DBCDE, I believe our statement of expectations has flagged that as a possibility in the future, but that's not something we're focused on at the moment.
Have you had requests from existing mobile operators to provide backhaul?
Yes, we have.
And what's been your response?
Our response is we're focused on the build we have to provide. By the way, we've been asked it for two areas, two different products. One is for backhaul for mobile cell sites. The other is just generally backhaul because of we've now got 121 points of interconnect, which is more than the small operators like.
Yep. All right. I guess that'll do for the moment.
Just one more on the MDUs, probably for Mr. Steffens, but do any of your construction contracts with Silcar and the other contractors cover MDUs at the present time?
We are No, we have separate contractors for that, but we are talking to one of them at the moment who is about to start to build the first ones, but it's not currently doing it.
Okay. In May last year, the NBN Co put out a request for proposals for MDU cablers. And the RFP stated that you were looking for companies to carry out, and I quote, installing fibre cabling and equipment within common areas of existing MDUs using pre-supplied detailed designs and bills of material. So my question is, as of today, end of October 2012, how many contracts have been awarded for MDU cablers, and what percentage of the MDUs that you have passed have been able to obtain active service?
We are in trials with a number of contractors. We are about to conclude the contracts award the contracts for the MDUs.
Yeah.
And
can you tell us who those contractors are?
No,
not yet.
Because we haven't concluded it.
Okay, all right.
And the number of MDUs passed, I would need to take on notice.
But are there any people in MDUs with that are getting active services? We've got active connections now.
Yes.
Do you know how many there are out of
I
your
need to take it on
6,000 odd? Yeah.
Some of the greenfield sites are also MDUs.
Yeah.
Yeah, both brownfields and greenfield.
But we have both brownfield and greenfield
Right.
active connections.
I'm trespassing on the goodwill of the genial chairman, so I'll...
What's of your colleagues? It's Luke and then Senator McDonald. So Luke first.
Just a couple of quick questions on the financials, and then I have some questions on the satellite. In relation to the income that's in the 6 monthly, or the accounts, there's a $580,000 negative cash flow for the 31st of December 2011. Why are receipts from customers negative in that period? 580,000. Sorry?
Where are you looking?
That is the unaudited half-yearly statements of cash flow. There's a $580,000 negative income from customers.
What page is it on?
Well, it's on page 55 of my documents from the committee.
Oh, our document.
Yeah, I might have to take it on notice if I
Okay.
can't find...
Page 32 of 42 in the government report to Joint Committee on National Broadband Network, 30 June.
Doesn't help us, I think.
Don't know if that's going to help.
Does that help you? Might have to take it on notice.
Yeah.
I'll take that on notice.
Okay.
yes.
And also, there are quite a number of items. If you add the two 6-month periods together, the period of 31 December 2011 plus the period of 30 June 2012, there are 6 items of discrepancy, or 6 items where the two figures don't add up, that the two 6-month figures don't add up to the 12-month figure. I'd also be interested in that, and they are receipts from customers are out or different, payments to suppliers are different, GST received, there is a difference, other revenue is slightly different, interest received is different, and interest expense is different.
I might have to take those on notice. I don't think I'll be able to give an answer here and now. We'll certainly provide an answer.
Yep. Righto, just moving on to the satellite. Could you tell us what the average total cost of labour for the installation of equipment at a customer premises is? And likewise, the average total cost of hardware at a customer premise for a satellite?
What we can tell you, Mr. Hartsacker, is that there is some data, by the way, on the one of the sheets we just handed out, which gives our long-term satellite capital cost, and maybe just in passing, you can see from that we are right where we expect to be. We have contracted for the spacecraft, the ground stations, 50% of the VSATs, and we will, before the end of the year, contract for the launch. So our long-term satellite is coming in right where we hoped it would by the corporate plan. In terms of the costs, I'm not sure we have those per connection with us. You're talking about the interim satellite?
Yes, yeah, of course.
Yep, okay.
And the average total cost of the interim satellite per customer. Does every customer who connects to the interim satellite service receive a new dish, modem, cables and associated hardware?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the expected lifespan of that installation of the interim satellite hardware and so on and so forth?
That will be replaced with the long-term satellite solution in due course. We launched the satellites in 2015, and obviously we will go through and we'll upgrade those sometime after that.
And when that's upgraded and we've got the 2015 solution fitted, what's the expected lifespan of that installation?
That would be limited by the lifetime of the satellites, and they're generally 15 years. Depends on how much fuel you can get on board with them at launch, but generally 15 years or longer. So
the lifespan of the material, the installations on a customer's house equates to roughly the lifespan of the satellite.
Although the dish certainly, the dish would last longer. The modem you may replace sooner if you wanted to do an upgrade. We've included that estimates in our corporate plan for upgrades of that, and even in fact over the 30-year lifespan of the project, we've anticipated the new satellites that might be needed.
Has NBN considered any solutions that allow homeowners to upgrade their NBN satellite dish, say for VAST, for the TV service?
No.
In relation to the presentation of data, the wireless and satellite rollout in the corporate plan is lumped together. Can we have a separate data provided with regards to the satellite aspects and the wireless aspects, because they're two very different customer sets, or two different customer sets and different projects effectively?
Well, the reason we have combined them is we are finding that where we are not able to put up a cell site, a tower, then we obviously have to use a satellite solution, and we've made that very public. The reason we've then combined them is we want to have that flexibility in case we can't get a site approved.
So what you're saying is you're not certain of the breakup between the satellite versus wireless?
So we thought it best to say this is the total of those two technologies.
How many NBN interim customers were previously Australian Broadband Guarantee customers? And that was touched upon in
I think we provided that in a response to a question.
That was
as far as I'm aware.
estimate, yeah.
Yes, that's Senate estimates, I think.
Yeah, okay. I've still got plenty more. For the first time customer, where are customers coming from that are not ABG customers?
We don't distinguish, frankly, whether they're an ABG customer or customers who don't have a satellite solution. We don't distinguish between the two. ABG customers, we often find, are absolutely thrilled with the vastly improved performance they're getting out of the NBN satellite solution, even though it's only the interim solution.
Just make the observation that there's 6 different entities taking a cut out of the interim satellite service. You've got a retail service provider, NBN Co, Optus, Gilat, Skybridge, and an installation contractor. And Gilat has an exclusive contract, as I understand, with Skybridge to install the satellite equipment at end users' premises. How does this exclusive installation contract ensure good value for taxpayers? And did NBN Co have any involvement in this contract?
We had involvement in the contracts in establishing the interim satellite solution from the beginning, and we went through our usual processes. Certainly there's a number of entities involved in the interim satellite solution, as there are in the fibre solution. If you look at the number of entities involved in the fibre solution, there's dozens and dozens of them, which is normal. There's nothing unusual about that.
And the exclusive arrangement between Gilat and Skybridge?
That's
something
decision up to them of who they may use to install VSATs.
What does Optus do as the prime contractor in the interim satellite rollout?
Well, for a start, they provide the satellite capacity on their satellites. We're using 2 satellites at the moment, one partly in Optus, but the majority of the satellite spectrum we're using is on IP Star or PISAT 4. Optus is acting as our partner and contractor to do the activations on that satellite service. That's an interim arrangement which we've got until we've launched our 2 large satellites.
Has NBN conducted any modelling or research about the impact on satellite RSPs of the move from the Australian Broadband Guarantee to the interim satellite service? And if so, what were the findings of that modelling?
We have not done any analysis of that.
And do you believe that there is sufficient remuneration in the arrangements to make it worthwhile for RSPs to operate on the satellite service? Because it's been put to me that by some that it is not commercially worthwhile to sell the satellite package.
Well, as of just recently, we got on the satellite close to 19,000 active customers, so there's a hell of a lot of people who are ordering a service from us in terms of RSPs. I'm talking about satellite providers who obviously are doing it because they think there's a profitable business there. Now, is it possible that they're not making as much money as they made on the ABG? That's possible. But what I can tell you for the end user, they're getting a much better service for a very competitive price now. So I think in terms of end users, this is a great move, and I think my colleagues in DBCDE would agree, in moving from the ABG to the interim satellite service, it's a very good deal for the end user.
What's the required maximum time frame for a customer to be connected to the NBN interim satellite service?
We don't have a specification for that, and I have to say it's taken off faster than we had anticipated. So we have many more active customers on today than we thought we would, which I think reflects the quality of the service.
So what time is it taking from an order being placed to a customer being
It's
activated?
variable. We could give you, I think what we need to give you is a distribution of times, so we can,
You could
we
do
can
that, please. Thank you. Let me just have a think. Could you just give us a bit of an update in relation to co-location of mobile phone operators and the NBN wireless, rollout of the wireless network? Mm-hmm. Where is the possible co-location of infrastructure? Where are you at corporately on that?
Well, we have, wherever we can use an existing tower, and we will do so. Wherever we can come to a commercial arrangement, and we've done so with a whole range of suppliers, Crown Castle, Optus, Telstra. That's our first preference, which is what we try to do. Only if there isn't a tower at the site we need, will we build a greenfields site.
So have you any towers that you're currently constructing that will have Telstra and Optus operating from them at this point?
We have an obligation when we put up a new tower to provide a facilities access arrangement with other potential users. So yes, of course we would do that.
And have you had a look at the ways in which you can improve mobile data and telephony in regional areas using your own mobile towers? And if so, what's the likely improvement?
We don't provide mobile towers. We provide cell sites for fixed wireless.
Your fixed wireless tower and the propensity for it to be able to be based.
So we don't provide voice service. We provide a broadband service. Now that can be used for voice over IP if people choose to do so. And we expect that the towers that we're putting up, mobile operators may use those towers for mobile cell sites.
Well, that was my question. With regard to the towers you propose to put up, have you done any projections as to the possibility of improving mobile phone telephony by the use of those towers?
No, that's not something we've been asked by the government to look at. And I'm not sure we're, by the way, well placed to do that. Our job is to provide fixed broadband, not enter into the mobile market.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Luke. Senator McDonald.
Thanks, Mr Chairman. I understand that the area from China Street to Ross River Road to Nathan Street and Ross River has recently been connected from your overhead wires to houses. on notice. This is in Townsville, I'm sorry. On notice, could you just tell me how many homes can be connected and how many actually are? And I raise that because my office has been in meltdown. We still have copper wire from people complaining about the overhead wire. But unless you have that there, but if not...
The overhead...
yes, about the unsightliness of it and the concern, which comes on to my next question, about, this is a cyclone-prone area. When cyclones hit, the poles go over. I was wondering if you have allowed for a cost of reconnecting the fibre if the poles are blown up. Is there some way you can demonstrate to me what the cost is? And can you also tell me what your arrangements are to resume service where poles are blown over in calamities, for example, in the instance I'm giving you, cyclones?
Yep. I don't know if you want to comment, Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have maintenance arrangements in place as well as, have made allowances for, in our corporate plan for cost of maintenance services. We do not have broken this down onto street level.
Sorry?
We haven't broken this down to street levels, as you just referred to, but these allowances are made, yes.
Well, can you just identify, either give me on notice or identify for me where I can find where you have allowed for those contingencies, not in this particular area, but across whatever area you have allowed? I'm just
in general maintenance costs.
Yes. Could you do that?
Yeah, we should.
Yeah. Okay, and that just brings me back finally to the other question I half got onto. I was interested in what costs you have allowed in your costing projections for paying the power companies to string these wires. And are you able to direct me to somewhere in your figures the Australia-wide figure you have allowed for these to pay these companies to
the power
hang
companies
your...
do not string the fibre. It's the construction companies who string the fibre.
Sorry, for the use of their power plant.
But it's the same question you had at the beginning.
Yeah. So why don't we take, if we can, Senator, we'll take on notice that question. We'll look at the NDAs and see if we can give you an average for the country that doesn't breach NDA.
But you must have in your... I'm not asking you to tell me because you've explained why that you can't, but you must have in your costing somewhere, either in the original ones or in the August 12 things, you must have a figure somewhere.
We have it.
You don't?
We do have it.
You do have it? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's the figure I'm asking for you to identify. It's not your actual cost, it's what you've allowed for that.
But what we've allowed is based on the agreements we've put in place.
But you haven't got agreements in place.
We've got agreements in place for the majority of them.
13 to 16.
Whatever it is. We have to check those numbers exactly, but it's around that sort of number. So we have a very solid basis for that estimate.
I'm asking for the Australia, but I don't want you to identify any particular power
that's
company.
That's what we'll try to do. So we'll have a look at what number we can give you, maybe an average which isn't breaching NDA.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. I've got a couple of more questions, a couple of quick ones. Paul, Mike's got one, then I've got a couple of questions if we've got time.
The two satellites that NBN's ordered, are they a standard design from the vendor?
There is no standard design of satellites.
There's no standard design for satellites?
Never a standard design of a satellite.
So they are customised?
Every satellite I think that's ever been put up is customised in one way or the other. But they are based on platforms that are well established. But you have to, for example, we're using 121 spot beams optimised over Australia. That has to be designed specifically for the satellite. If you look, for example, at Jabiru 1, which is the satellite that may go up if it's funded, it was largely, I think it was being quoted as a gentleman who's running a company was saying we should be using that satellite. It had 8% of its capacity allocated to Australia.
Right. You mentioned before that you're not looking at the question of whether wireless infrastructure could be used to improve mobile coverage as well as provide fixed broadband?
Other than in general terms, if we're putting up new cell sites, we anticipate those cell sites could be used to improve mobile coverage.
Have you looked at the Rural Broadband Initiative in New Zealand?
We're aware of it. We haven't looked in detail at it.
That is using the same wireless technology for both fixed and broadband, is it not?
For fixed and broadband?
For fixed and mobile.
I believe there's part of the objective.
Fixed substitute broadband and mobile.
Yep.
So that
it could well be, but that's not the objectives, as you said, Mr. Fletcher, that the government's given us. They've asked us to focus on fixed broadband.
And one last question for you. Senator Conroy said on Meet the Press on the 22nd of July that the total number of services in operation at that time was 15,000. Could you provide on notice a reconciliation of that with the figures that you've provided for services in operation as at 30 June in the annual report?
Yeah, sure we can, yes.
Thank you.
Mike? Thank you, Chair. Mr Quigley, I'd like to touch on a subject we have in previous hearings, and that was the issue of fibre network extensions. And reading through the corporate plan, there's a line in there that says there's considerable interest from the community and various levels of government in network extensions. And I'd like to ask, have you received any applications for that so far?
We have received some applications. I don't know the number off the top of my head. Frankly, it hasn't been that larger number at this point.
And they would all be at total cost to the organisations applying?
Yes, we look at the incremental costs of, for example, if somebody wants a fibre extension, they're in the wireless footprint and they want us to extend the fibre footprint to cover their premise or a number of premises, we look at the incremental cost of doing that. In fact, we've done an analysis of that for Julia Creek.
And the fibre extension, I take it, would then have to wait in that circumstance till there was somewhere to extend it from?
Yes, we can't do a fibre extension until we have the fibre network already in place.
So it's always an add-on to an area?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, look, I've just got a couple of questions and we'll wrap it up. NBN Co has commented in the media that the ACCC decision on the Telstra SSU delayed the NBN rollout. The NBN Co corporate plan outlined the date for finalisation of the Telstra agreement as June 2011.
That was the original corporate
That's
plan.
right, yep. The ACCC has given us evidence that it did not receive the Telstra SSU until July 2011. So can you explain or clarify how the ACCC contributed, if at all, to the delay in the NBN rollout with its consideration of the Telstra SSU?
We're not suggesting that the ACCC contributed to the delay. We're suggesting that we couldn't. We anticipated in December 2010 that we would have reached agreement and could start using the national duct data from Telstra, which we need to do all the things that Mr Steffens has spoken about, by June 2011. That was probably optimistic. We underestimated the length and time and the complexity of reaching final agreement with Telstra, and we also, I have to say, didn't anticipate the fact that the deal could not commence until after the Telstra SSU and how long that would take. It didn't occur until March, so we couldn't get the national duct data until then. So we couldn't do the design process that we talked about earlier.
Okay. So in light of that question, am I still right to think, and the committee's right to think, that there is between a 6-month and a 12-month delay in the original NBN rollout?
From the December 2010?
Yep.
Yes.
And if so, can you clarify for us the delay in the NBN rollout? You know, what is the reason behind that 6 to 12 month delay?
Well, there was a number of reasons, one of which was the decision, the ACCC decision on the points of interconnect. They moved from 14, which we had designed on and based our network on, to 121. That required a rejig of the network, quite a substantial one. We had anticipated getting the national duct data in June. We got it the following March. And of course, the construction contracts themselves took us a bit longer to negotiate those because we terminated the process and went into a new process to make sure we get value for money for the Australian taxpayer. Okay. Now, I have to also say, Chair, that the issues we talked about around addressing was also quite a task to undertake, and we also took on board on January 1st, 2011, the greenfields requirement. And I had some information because I know the committee was interested in greenfields. It looks like we're out of time to do that, but that was quite a substantial undertaking.
Oh, well, feel free to table it. Or...
Okay, well, it's on, in fact, it's the last slide that's in the pack that we handed out there. And it's showing basically the same pattern as Mr. Steffens has talked about before. What you can see on the very left-hand side there is the number of applications that we have had since we started this. Remember, we took responsibility from January 2011. And up from that time up to the end of September this year, we've had close to 2,900, in fact more than 2,900 applications for estates, different stages. That's almost 150,000 lots, and in fact in the first quarter of FY13, the last quarter that's just passed, we received 322 developer applications. One thing that's very important to understand is that the number of lots per application we're getting is an average of 51. That is vastly different to what the smaller commercial companies are going, because they can pick and choose which greenfield sites they want to supply service to. So, for example, Opticom, I think the company started in 2005. They did turned on their first site in 2007, and since that time they've done 35 sites. But their average is a little over 2,000 lots per site. So this is great business. If you can do very big sites, close to cities, if you can pick and choose. We can't do that. We're dealing with lots that are or applications that are 51 lots per site. So we have had, obviously, a big battle in the start-up of this process. It's been quite complex, but as you can see, we are now getting on top of that. With the network design documents that Mr. Steffens talked about in brownfields, we have now worn down. We had quite a backlog in June. We have now cleared that backlog, and we're running at double the rate in September that we were running in June for doing those design documents. We're now doing 50 NDDs a week on average. So we've cleared that backlog. We produced 528 NDDs by the end of September, and as you can see at the end of September there, we now have 45,000 lots issued to our construction partners for getting under construction. In terms of lots passed, at June we were at a bit over 10,000, in fact 10,054. At the end of September we were at 19,730. In other words, we doubled the number of lots passed in the last quarter. We've done more in that last quarter than we did in the preceding quarters up to there. And in terms of premises activated, at the end of June we were at 500. At the end of September we were at 1824, so we tripled that, and in fact at the end of October we're at 2,500. So we are now really starting to ramp up. Just by way of example, this comparison is often made with us with Opticom and the performance. Just to remember, those Opticom have done 35 sites completed since they started in 2005. Last week we signed contracts for 38 sites in a week. We've completed NDDs for 36 sites, and we handed into service 13 sites. So we're talking about chalk and cheese here in terms of scale. What we're doing is having to put up new developments anywhere across the country no matter what the size is, provided it's going to be above 100 lots over 3 years. This is a huge job. It's a very difficult job, but we are getting on top of it.
In the short time, well,
You've just referred to the rule of over 100 lots, but then you just said the average was 51 lots. But
Yes,
can
that's
you
in the
explain
first-
that?
That's because it's 100 lots. And by the way, there's no way we can police this. If a developer comes to us and they say, we're going to do 100 lots in this area over 3 years, stage 1 is 10 lots, we have to do it, which is what we're doing.
in the time, I just want to get you on the record with a couple of other things. In the new corporate plan, there's a legal notice on page 2. And just in light of that legal notice, what legal and moral obligations does NBN Co see that it has to meet the NBN rollout forecasts set out on page 36?
I don't think we have a legal requirement.
Have you got the legal notice?
I have to check with our lawyers on this one,
Yep,
but I
take that on
think
notice.
so.
Feel free to take it on notice. To meet the forecasts.
To meet their forecast.
Yeah. If you can take that on notice,
Yeah, sure.
it'd be good to get it on the record.
I'll only be flayed in the court of public
Yeah, that's right. that we understand.
Who would be doing that? The financial result, I've got 3 questions on that. Why are the financial statements provided to the committee in mid-year again unaudited when the committee received the performance report after the NBN Co annual report was already released?
You have to answer that one.
That's what I'd have to refer to the department. This is the government's report, so...
Okay, you might have just answered it, but if you could take that on notice, that'd be good. And in the information we've received, what has caused employee expenses to almost double since the end of 2011-12?
I didn't get the question, sorry.
Why is it employee expenses?
What has caused employee expenses to almost double since the end of 2011-12?
Main reason is probably because the amount
Employing
of
more
people
people.
doubled.
Doubled, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted
Yes, that's right.
it's to get you on the record. Is that your understanding of?
That's the reason. What's the number at the end of June 2011? How many? We'll have to check the numbers.
1620 employees at the end of June 2011.
And how many at the end of June 2012?
Oh, sorry, June 2012 is
1600.
1620.
June 2011.
Was around 800. So
Yeah, I think we've about doubled. We'll check the exact numbers,
Yep, if
but
you could
we've
take that
about
on
doubled.
notice.
Yep.
And can you clarify how long you expect NBN Co to be in a state of experiencing an operating loss?
That is in the corporate plan. I think we're 2019.
Yeah, 2019.
2019.
Wyatt Roy will be in his second
No,
term as
no,
Prime Minister by the time.
There's a lot of NBN Co employees with that question. Finally, with pricing, 2 questions. What is NBN Co expecting it will do to access pricing for retail service providers as download usage rates increase over time?
I think they're referring to our CVC pricing. Our CVC pricing, we are expecting, as usage goes up, we're expecting our price per megabit per second in the CVC to go down. That megabits per second in the CVC equates to gigabytes per month for the end user. So we're expecting to drive those costs down. Remember, our modus operandi is to return to the government and then get wholesale prices down as fast as we can. To do that, by the way, we're attempting to get our costs down as fast as we can, which is why the cost that Mr. Payne put on the table, we will not stop there. We will keep driving costs lower and lower and lower every year.
Okay, and can you clarify the mechanisms in place to prevent any price rises being directly passed on to consumers?
That we can't. We deal with wholesale prices, and we've agreed in the SAU we're holding prices fixed for the first 5 years of the SAU, but we can't make any guarantees of what we're expecting the market to operate at the retail level.
Okay, so we take you on good faith that you're driving prices down.
We will drive wholesale prices down. Yes.
Final question.
No, it's not a question actually.
Final statement.
No. I'm just trying to be helpful. There are 2 pages that you haven't, because we dragged you off on other issues, you haven't dealt with the fixed wireless capital expenditure per site and long-term satellite service capital cost. Do you want to just speak briefly to those?
Yes, well, I think
If
Mr.
you
Payne was going
tender
to
the
talk to
documents.
Speak very quickly. I think the satellite one we have covered. So
Can you just tell us what the dollars are there? I mean, I know this is one of those mysterious columns. We don't even have a point of reference.
this is again one where we're not providing. We're providing this to give you an idea of relativities. We're not going to.
But we have, I think when we announced the contracts, we announced the dollar values with those contracts.
For the satellite portion.
For the satellite portion.
Why can't you just put a figure on it? Just tell us what the numbers are.
Well, we can provide you those numbers that we've announced. The reason why we wouldn't put a figure on the total, because the people who are now tendering for the launch would use the numbers we've got, look at the total and subtract the difference and say that's what
the mixture of subs contracted and subs not.
But we can certainly give you, Mr. Turnbull, the costs that we have signed in contracts.
This is much more important. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. All right. Oh, okay, just one question. Listen, I know you're driving costs down. Why do you still have an NBN Tasmanian board paying a couple of $100,000 to the directors when it's no longer a separate company? Doesn't have any outside shareholders anymore.
That is the final question. And you can take that on notice if you want.
I'll take it on notice.
Oh, come on. Come on, it's a couple of $100,000 a year. You're just paying for no value.
You can take it on. We've got a lot of questions on notice. It'll come back.
Yes, take that one on notice.
With the chairman in your corner.
Yeah, that's right. Trying to get broadband to Port Macquarie. Thank you for coming today to assist the committee. If you've been asked to provide additional information and there have been a lot of questions on notice, could you please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 9th of November? If the committee has any further questions, feel free to put them in writing through the Secretariat. I'd like to stress, colleagues, the time-critical nature of getting answers to questions on notice to the Secretariat, both the ones coming in and the ones coming back, by the end of next week, because the committee is attempting to report in the final sitting week before the 29th of November. But thank you all for coming in. We might actually have a break. I think there is a Telstra conspiracy because we're going to have some divisions again. Oh, because it happened last time.
Sorry for knocking that off.
So we may have a break for 10 minutes and we will hopefully start at 10 past 8, but it may take a little bit longer, but apologise.
You're down to one senator, so what else are you going to do?
So sorry about that. There were 4 significant votes. But I now welcome representatives of the Telstra Corporation, and thank you for returning to Canberra tonight to give evidence after we had the same problem arise a few weeks ago. For the Hansard record, could you please state your name and address?
James Shaw, I'm Director of Government Relations at Telstra, and I'm in our office, Barton ACT.
Yolanda Trozhichevsky, Group Regulatory Manager from our office at 400 George Street, Sydney.
And Julian Clark, Director of Workplace Relations and Policy, 242 Exhibition Street, Melbourne.
Thanks for that. It's the first time I've ever had to ask for address, so thanks for giving it. Although the committee does not require to give evidence under oath, I advise you that these hearings are formal proceedings of the Parliament and warrant the same respect as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Would you like to make an opening statement?
Look, thanks, Chair. Given the circumstances where last time we did have an opening statement prepared, which we subsequently provided to you, which I believe has been accepted as a formal submission. We don't have an opening statement to make, so that statement stands. If I could, there are just a couple of figures in that statement which I'd like to revise for the committee. In the statement previously provided, we indicated that there were 2,830 training attendances in the past the last 2 months of the financial year. That figure should have read 2,826, so it's a reduction in 4. That comprised, according to our previous statement, 892 attendances relating to structural separation. That figure should have been 1,890. And we previously advised that 936 attendances related to other curricula. That figure should have been 936. So there are only small variations, but we did want to put the correct figures on the record. Other than that, I think all of the important matters that we sought to address at that time are covered in that opening statement. We'll just move on to questions.
Okay, I'll throw to others. Mike, you got questions? Or Doug does? Yeah. Leave it, Doug.
Thanks. Mr Shaw, the committee was in New Zealand recently, and we met with Chorus, who were doing the rollout of the fibre mainly in the metropolitan area. They indicated to us that there would be no new copper laid in New Zealand, that they were actually of the view that it's in their long-term interest for the copper to be turned off, and that they would eat up their own network as they progressively put the fibre out. Is that a similar position for Telstra?
Senator, the position we've taken on those matters really are covered by the agreements we've reached with the government and the NBN Co through the definitive agreements, which really is around the progressive closure of our copper as the fibre is rolled out and customers migrated across, recognising that we do have agreements with the government under the TUSMA, Telecommunications Universal Service Management Authority, to keep copper in place in the last 7% and continue to provide services on that last 7%. And we also have an agreement with the government in respect to some greenfield sites where we will be deploying copper to those sites where there are less than 100 lots in order to provide services to people prior to the NBN being in a position to roll out. So for us our position is that there will be continued deployment of copper in some instances, and there will be a maintenance of copper network in some instances.
What Chorus were indicating is that they had pressurised copper. The copper was pressurised in a sheath.
Right.
Right? I don't know if you're the right guy to ask about this. But
this may be one for you taking on notice, but nonetheless.
Yeah, and the pressurised sheaths caused significant problems if there was a breach in the sheath, and the maintenance was very expensive, and that's why they were pleased to be moving away from what they described as the old technology to the new fibre technology. Do you have much sheathed copper?
Senator, that is one I think we'll have to take on notice.
Yeah, if you take that on notice, could you also then take on notice as well, can you give us some idea of the problems with sheathed copper? in relation to maintenance, just the general problems that you have. Chorus seem to be quite open about their problems. If you could maybe give us some idea on that. And I want to go back to actually the 12th of November 2003. I want to test people's memory. A Dr. Warren, are you aware of a Dr. Warren?
I certainly am.
Yeah, I think he was quite senior in Telstra.
He's certainly quite senior at the moment, yes.
He's still with you?
He certainly is.
Back in a Senate References Committee back in the 12th of November 2003 under questioning from Senator Lundy about the copper network, Dr. Warren said this, and I'll read you the full thing. He said, "I think it's right to suggest that ADSL is an interim technology." So he was pretty clear about that. "It's probably the last sweating, if you like, of the old copper network assets. In copper years, if you like, we are at a sort of transition. We are 5 minutes to midnight." Now, if we were at 5 minutes to midnight in the sweating of the copper network in 2003, where are we now?
Well, we're in the middle of a transition to an NBN under the definitive agreements which we've reached with the government and NBN co-senators. So we're progressively migrating off copper as the fibre is deployed.
But that's not what I'm asking you. I mean, copper's still there.
It is.
People are going to have copper for a few years yet.
And we will continue to maintain that copper in order to provide services to our customers.
And but that copper that's left, where does that stand on Dr. Warren's clock?
I wouldn't like to venture into what Dr. Warren's clock might look like, Senator, but I'd just like to say that from where the company sits at the moment, we see value in the copper as it currently sits, and we will continue to provide services on that. But we're moving into an environment where we're just, as the NBN deploys, looking to decommission that copper and provide fibre-based services.
So Dr. Warren's still with you?
He is.
What's his position now?
He's Group Managing Director of Corporate Affairs.
You appeared before us back in April.
Back in April. Okay.
We've got some limited time.
Okay,
so have we got more?
Yeah, look, the last position, can you take it on notice and maybe ask Dr. Warren where we are on the Warren clock? Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. I enjoy asking my boss that question.
It's good.
Actually, you should play the video of this to him. The questioning in the video on YouTube would be just awesome.
Mike.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I would like to ask, I think this follows on from a question I've asked previously, the status of the employees in the automatically eligible work group, and in particular, what categories of employees I know have been identified, but what are they then going to be trained to do? So in terms of skills, has that been identified?
I think the answer is it's been identified to an extent, in the sense that we know some of the things that we're requiring them to do. So at the moment, the employees have already been retrained. So we think in the last financial year retrained 107 people in new skills. So they're actually trained completely so that they can actually do a new skill, and that was the actual installation and migration of customers from our network onto the NBN network. So that's part of the curriculum that's there. We also know that there'll be certain things that we need to do in terms of operating, maintaining the network, in terms of network planning and design. And then there are other curricula which we call value-add services, which are more about the types of things that we might be able to do for customers within their home, and those sorts of training programs are being designed at the moment. So that might be, connecting everything up in somebody's home so that it all works properly and those sorts of things. But to an extent, I suppose, it's a sort of moving feast. So, what we know now, we might get into 3 or 4 years' time, there will be technological advances and there might be different things that we are retraining people for at that point.
Okay, so the next question is, does every Telstra employee retrained under the AEW keep their employment with Telstra?
I don't think that we can say that.
Because some will leave anyway, or because you don't need that many, or you haven't identified that many places?
Well, because I don't think we actually know exactly what we will need at the moment. I mean, it will depend on the rollout and it will depend on the extent of what we're asked to do by NBN. It will depend on how many customers we have at any given time, those sorts of factors. So it's very difficult at this point in time to actually predict exactly what will happen in 3 or 4 years.
But just following up on that, but you're retraining them effectively to go from working with a copper HFC network to working with a fibre, where the network will based largely on fibre, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not like they're being trained up on skills that they're not inherently, working on within Telstra. Like, for example, that you're retraining them into an entirely new vocation. It's within telecommunications.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so if you then get work from NBN Co, as you I think you were suggesting in some of your earlier comments, they can then work within Telstra on work that NBN Co requires, for example, migration from, copper to broadband, correct? To fibre.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what the type of work was, but yeah, in a general sense, I think that's correct.
You just, I think you threw, I'm not going to speak for Mr. Simon, but I think you may have thrown us when you said you don't know if you can retain them, because isn't the purpose of the...
Oh, look, the purpose of the deed is obviously to retain as many people as we can, and we recognise we have a very skilled workforce at the moment. We want to retain as many of those people as we can, and we understand that's the purpose of the retraining. But if you're asking me, can I give a guarantee that every employee who's in the automatically eligible work groups will be retained, it's not something I could be in a position to do now, more because I don't know.
It's not so much a guarantee, I think it's more the intention, Telstra's intention with those employees once retrained. I think that's safer ground for us to sort of stand on and have this conversation.
Well, I think our intention would be to retain, as many employees as we can for the work that we actually have to do. So it very much depends on what work is actually there. As to the number of people that can be retained to do that.
But I think it's fair to say, Mr. Disick, that we're not designing this such that we retrain and then just exit employees.
No.
They're very. We like to keep our employees. We've invested a lot in them, irrespective of the Commonwealth funding or taxpayers' funding here under the retraining funding deed. We've invested a lot in our skilled employees, of our shareholders' dollars, and we would like to continue to employ those people and utilise their skills to provide services to our customers.
Well, that would be the concern, Mr. Shaw, that we're putting in $100 million and then they just exited out of the corporation.
I understand the concern.
Yeah. Is it a publicly available document?
The RFD.
The RFD?
Or the agreement that you've come up with?
I don't believe it is.
I don't believe it is, no.
Is there a reason why not?
Look, I'm sure there is, if it's not a publicly available document, Mr. Oakeshott.
Well, the question is, can you provide the reason? Because I wouldn't imagine it'd be commercial. It'd be hard to build a commercial in confidence argument on a retraining.
I think there are some aspects of the retraining funding deed, particularly some of the detail in some of the training detail and things like that, and some of the numbers involved that probably are commercial.
Just to clarify, there are two documents. It's the RFD, the overarching RFD, and then the Telstra training plan.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right, but there's some detail, I suppose, in the RFD that actually goes to aspects of the training plan, if that makes sense.
So can you come back to us with the reasons why they're not publicly available documents, and even better, with a release of whatever aspects you're comfortable releasing publicly, if they're not commercially sensitive?
Yep.
Did you have questions, Ed?
Oh, yeah, I do, Chair, but I'm waiting for Mr. Simon.
Yeah, I still have some more.
Oh, sorry.
In terms of the AEW and specific areas of need, is there a particular geographic breakdown where some skills are needed more than others?
Well, certainly the skills mix changes as the NBN is deployed. So in those areas where the NBN is deploying its network, we clearly have a greater need for people with fibre-based skills and the ability to install and provide services on the fibre network. So that geographic breakdown would really just follow the NBN rollout.
Okay, so there'd be no particular state-by-state difference if the NBN was being rolled out at an even rate across states?
Yeah, I think that's correct. From the best of my knowledge.
Yeah. It's a general question.
Yeah, I'm not a technical expert in the sort of rollout, but yeah, so far as I'm aware, it's even.
And I suppose the other question I haven't asked along this line so far is, under that retraining, is there occasions where there is then positions available elsewhere but not necessarily local, particularly in regional areas?
I don't actually know the answer to that. I'd need to take that on notice.
Okay, that's fine.
RFD?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
You've retrained 107 employees so far, and that was ahead of the actual formal acceptance of the training plan by government. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is great. How long is it taking? You've identified there are 6,000 employees in the AEW. How long will it take them on average to be retrained? Obviously, bearing in mind there are a range of competencies that it could be very individualised, but what's the sort of average time that's taken to retrain people?
I don't actually know
More to
the
get a
answer
sense
to
of
that.
how long it will take all up to retrain that group of 6,000.
Well, that's over the life of the deed.
Yeah, that's over the life of the deed. That's the thing, and it really will depend on what skills we actually identify as being required at any particular point.
Okay, and that's an 8-year deed.
It's an 8-year deed, but the first training plan actually only covers a 3-year period, so through to the end of 30 June 2014.
So is it conceivable that you would see more employees added to the AEW, the size of the AEW over the course of that 8 years, or is it that you see that all up, the only number of employees that need to be retrained is at 6,000?
Well, I suppose the training is for two groups. So there's the AEW, and we expect that to stay relatively constant at around, it's that sort of 6,500 mark. But then there's also another group, which are those people who aren't within that AEW area, but who otherwise may face redundancy as a result of the NBN rollout. And at the moment, we don't have a good estimate on what that group will be, but then that group may fluctuate depending on exactly what happens in the future.
Those recent announcements, can I double act here?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Those recent announcements on the cutbacks in Sydney, Melbourne, Townsville and beautiful Lismore, do they fit in to either of those two categories?
No, they don't. They weren't connected at all with NBN rollout.
So they can't participate in any of the retraining at all?
Not under the deed.
Not under the deed, but
what are you doing?
Well, when we make decisions which unfortunately have employment implications, then we have a range of activities that we undertake with the employees in terms of seeking to redeploy, look for other opportunities and the like within the business. And then at the end of the day, if we fail to find work for them in the business, to support them to move out of the business into other areas. So Mr Clark can give you some more detail about what we have by way of redundancy and redeployment for general employees. But in terms of those Lismore, Townsville call centres and like, they were not NBN related. So they were caught up with our general provisions.
Right. So it's copper, HFC or bust, in blunt.
So
you're in if you're copper or HFC.
Well, you're in if you're within that group of the automatically eligible work group as defined, plus others that may be impacted as a consequence of the NBN, yes.
Yeah. So what about this? Is there anything in the deed that talks about local employment versus, this issue of offshoring? Is there any obligations in the retraining deed in that space at all?
No.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
I've got another one if you want.
Yeah, no sweat. So we invest 100 million in retraining the 6,000 or so employees who would be covered by the scope of the RFD. But it is, the key here is ultimately, isn't it, that they need to be able to work on an NBN network to basically employ the skills that they've been retrained on, correct?
They need to work on a fibre network, yes.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've only got limited amounts of, say, velocity, your velocity product or whatever, so it's really, ultimately, it's whether or not they get a chance to work on the NBN.
Well, no, we do deploy other fibre in our network.
As business solutions for, say, larger
Yeah, the point-to-point
and-
fibre, that sort of thing. We also
Yeah.
have, a fair bit of fibre in terms of the backhaul network, our
Yep.
mobile network, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So it's
Okay.
not all just the access network.
Are you, and I understand in asking this question there'll be commercial sensitivity, so I'm not asking for detail, but rather, if I can put it conceptually, to get a sense of what work are you getting out of NBN to be able to employ the skills of people that are retrained effectively?
Look, the bulk of the work that we're getting out of NBN at the moment is related to the build of the transit network, which is part of the transit network, which is part of the definitive agreements, the infrastructure agreement we've got, which is part of the NPV cash flow, is to deliver that transit network to NBN Co, and that's the bulk of our work. We did some work with them around the rollout in Brunswick.
Mm-hmm. Will that work be able to sustain the employment of 6,000 employees?
Just have a moment, please, sir.
Yeah, sure.
The answer is probably no.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any indication that NBN will give you? Will you need to obviously compete to gain contracts? And is that what is Telstra intending to compete for contracts in the future to carry out some of this work?
Look, we stand ready to do whatever we can to assist NBN Co to expedite the rollout of the network, but we recognise that they do have a commercial imperative and they're bound by procurement obligations, so they will deal with that from their side. But we're quite open about our willingness to take on whatever work we can gather from this particular project.
In terms of skilled labour then, Telstra should have an advantage in that area because many other companies, your competitors in that field, may not have ready access to skilled labour with fibre knowledge. Would that be true?
Well, there are other companies, and many of whom we use ourselves to deploy fibre. Not all our work is done by our in-house workforce. We do use contractors and the like who have these sort of skills. So we're not the sole repository of skills for fibre deployment in Australia.
I suppose my point there is they've all been employed up to now doing works. Now there is more works, so there is therefore more demand. So wouldn't that put Telstra in a very good position in relation to picking up contracts going forward from the NBN simply because you've got that pool of labour?
We'd like to think that we can pick up work from NBN by virtue of the value that we can provide, including the skills that our employees have.
So, in light of your answers, the composition of the workforce sounds like an area where internally you must be having to make some decisions directly because of the NBN rollout. Is there anything you wanted to put on the record as far as how the workforce would be changing because of that NBN rollout?
No, look, the point we'd make about the structure and composition of our workforce is there are a range of factors that impact on employment decisions in the business. The NBN and the structural change to the industry that the NBN is creating is one of them. But there are a whole range of other factors that play within our business at the moment which impact on employment decisions. And you mentioned the Lismore Townsville call centres before. One of the factors behind the business decision to close those facilities was the fact that we're getting a large reduction in the number of complaints coming to our front of house. The TIO, the Telecoms Industry Ombudsman, released a report yesterday that showed that complaints about our services have dropped by 21% while we're increasing the number of customers quite considerably. So you just see that the call volumes to front of house change as a consequence of our getting our processes right and of our customers going online and using the online facilities. So that is another factor that also plays out. So it's not a sort of steady state situation and then one thing plays out. We've got a range of factors that impact on decisions around employment in the business.
Do you report based on the different roles that people play? Like, is that publicly available information as to domestic controlled entities, the arrangements you've got outside of Australia, just the breakdown, so there is a handle on just what is happening with the composition of the workforce.
Yeah, I think...
or is that something...
We report some basic numbers in our annual report. It doesn't really give you a breakdown of the types of work that those employees are doing. So, I mean, we reported at the end of June, our domestic full-time staff were 30,203, and then the total workforce, which would include some contractors and some overseas labour as well, was 39,972. But there's no actual breakdown within that of what people do.
And that's what I'm looking for. Is that something that's commercially sensitive, or is that something you'd be able to provide on notice, just to help with this question of how many are particularly able to work on things like the retraining process? How many are a bit exposed, like Friends in Lismore? How many are back office, domestic entities, offshore? Just the whole composition under those broader figures as a bit of a reflection of, a major telco in Australia today with a range of pressures on it.
Yeah, Ms. Rachel, if we could take that on notice, we'll see what numbers we can provide to you that would go to some of those issues. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Shaw, in the submissions that were made by the CPU, there was a concern, as they describe it, that the retraining for the NBN related work would effectively deliver up a patchwork of skill sets as opposed to comprehensive, full qualification. Under the Telstra training plan, is the retraining being done to get people to full qualification level, or will they just have a group of skill sets?
Well, under the training, I mean, we're obliged to ensure that at least 70% of the funding is spent on accredited training, and we're on target to meet that. So when you
what's with the other 30%? When you say accredited training, that's provided by an RTO. So what's the other 30% then? I know, I'm sorry to interrupt you and break your train of thought, but maybe you want to come and answer that later.
Well, I mean, at the moment, I mean, when I say we're on track, we've exceeded that, and I think, we're expecting that a lot of the training, certainly most of the things that we've done to date, or the course we've designed, do map to the AQF. What we've said, and what we've said to the CPU during consultation, is that effectively what we're doing is we're saying what are the skills that we actually need people to do, and we will retrain people to do those things, and we will then map that through to the AQF. Now, whether or not that actually gives somebody a full qualification, a full Cert 3 or something, will depend on exactly which modules they do and how many of the competencies they gain.
But when you say which modules they do, it's fair to say that you will be the drivers on determining what modules they do. It won't be individual selection, will it? Like no, the individual won't go, well, I want to do X, Y, Z. You'll go, well, we think based on what your current skill set is and what we need you to do, that you'll need to do these modules, correct?
That's correct, yes. Okay. But what we've said is that where an employee, for example, has 90% of the competencies required, we will consider whether or not we're able to effectively top them up so that they can get that qualification.
Okay.
You got more?
Yeah, I do. So, so it is. You would see them getting the full competency, being able to go to a Cert 3 fully, correct?
Well, it's not a decision that we've actually made yet, but what we've said is that we understand the position that's been put to us about, well, surely it makes sense if somebody's got 90% of the qualification that we actually help them get the 10%, and that's something that we will look to make a decision on when we actually get to that point. But we do accept that there is some logic in that.
Yep.
But I suppose what we're not doing is saying to an individual employee, we will train you so that you have everything for this particular certificate. That's not the way in which the training's being rolled out. It's being rolled out more on a sort of as-needs basis based on the particular type of work that we have and the skills that we identify they need to be retrained in to do that work.
All right. When we met with Telstra back in April, like you had only just submitted the plan, the Telstra training plan to the department. That was then, from what I can see in the materials provided to us, and I think this may be included in your opening statement, finally agreed to by government on the 25th of June. We were unable to get specific detail back in April because, understandably so, you were going through the discussions internally. I have to say it's very difficult based on the opening statement that, and this comes back to something we have effectively touched on earlier, it's very difficult from your opening statement to get a sense of the way this plan will operate. And it would be good, bearing in mind your commercial sensitivities, to be able to get from you, and I put this on notice, a much more detailed paper talking about what you intend to do under the plan agreed with by government, or plans agreed by government, I should say. So if we could get that, it would be excellent, if you could provide that. The other thing I don't understand, Mr Clark or Mr Shaw, is how once you've trained these 6,000 in the AEW, like, because it would, I imagine, and this sort of comes to something that Mr Simon asked about geographic location, I have an impression in my mind, which I'm happy for you to dispel, that there's sort of, it's almost disparate. There'll be sort of clumps in metro areas, then you'll have some in regional. Like, how will they sit within your internal organisation structure, these employees? Some will be CFW, some will sit elsewhere in your organisation. Like, for the purpose of being able to properly harness all the skills that they've now been retrained in, understanding that there's some work that you're currently doing under the agreement with Telstra, and then maybe some work that you obtain as a result of contracts you obtain from NBN, but getting a sense of the longevity of their employment. Like, how will these 6,000, continue to be employed? I'm having difficulty understanding how you'll manage that. Because they're going to go from copper to fibre, like what?
Well, it will depend on the sort of tasks that they might end up doing. To the extent that their role is to migrate a customer across, it's a retail customer says they want to come with Telstra on the NBN, and there's work to be done on our side. As a consequence of that, then our employees would clearly be involved in that. I understand the essence of your question. I suppose the answer to your question is it depends, and some of those dependencies are not things that we directly control.
Have you got any future projections on expected works? Which you can then draw some conclusions on how many people you're going to need?
Could I take that on notice and go and talk to our operations network people, please, Chair?
Yeah.
Because Mr Shaw, my worry is that we invest the 100 million through this deed, train up these people, and then what happens as to the type of work that they're actually deployed.
Yeah. Well, I think the Minister and the NBN Co have both indicated that they expect significant employment during the rollout of the network to generate significant new jobs. So I suppose if we look at the market rather than just Telstra for employment, there are a range of opportunities that will arise as a consequence of the rolling out of the network itself. So it's not as if, at least in the period covering the rollout of the NBN, that this is an area of declining employment across the telco sector. It just may be that individual businesses within that readjust their numbers to reflect their relative roles in that market.
Is one of the sort of KPIs or one of the measurements of this agreement that like an employment-related KPI, that is that once they're trained, that they will be the number of employees that you will keep as a percentage of that AEW employed gainfully by Telstra over an extended period of time? Do you have so let me rephrase it, it's probably a very clumsy way on my part to frame it, but do you have a KPI that says once retrained you will have X percent of these employees in the AEW gainfully employed for a certain period of time?
Within Telstra?
Correct.
No, I don't believe so, no.
Is there an expectation by government about how long employees will be, will retain employment within Telstra as a result of retraining?
Not so far as I'm aware. And I suppose it's important to remember in that context the sort of dual purpose that the deed was expressed to have, which is one, to support the retraining of employees within Telstra, but then secondly also to support more broadly the skilling of a workforce to roll out the NBN. So some of the things that we've indicated are dependencies, I suppose, which include how much work we get from NBN, what the rollout schedule is, things like that. The answers to those questions may point to which one of those purposes is perhaps best served by the retraining.
But wouldn't just to slightly rephrase your answer, wouldn't it be right to say retraining with a purpose at the end, rather than just retraining as a goal of the $100 million?
Oh, there certainly is a purpose.
It's absolutely with a purpose.
I'm not
yes.
verbaling you, but with a purpose at the end.
Yes, the purpose is either so they continue with employment within Telstra, or they're retrained to operate in an NBN environment.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you've also, just to clarify, you've indicated that less than 6,000 positions, in your view, will be available within Telstra as part of that.
No, I think we said we
NBN.
couldn't guarantee the full 6,000. We didn't say it would be less than. We just can't guarantee, given what we have in front of us at the moment, that everyone would be retained in the business.
Okay. So did the government ask for anything in this retraining when they...
They certainly did. They asked us to provide retraining for these individuals so that they're skilled to operate and perform work in a fibre world.
But without KPIs on the back end of that, without any... The ask was, can you retrain 6,000, get them NBN ready? Here's 100 million.
Yeah, look, in essence, they were saying is, here is $100 million because we will continue to invest our own money in training our people through this period as well. So here is a Commonwealth contribution of $100 million to assist in the retraining of workers affected by the NBN, such that they are then skilled up to work in a fibre world, either with Telstra or with other people who are associated with the NBN.
Can you give us a sense, this is my last question, Chair,
Yeah.
what are your measures for success in this training plan other than retraining the 6,000 employees that you've identified in the AEW? Can you give us how are you measuring, your achievements under this plan?
Well, within the terms of the agreement, which is around providing the training to the identified workers. So the retraining funding deed requires us to do certain things, provide certain courses and to get certain people through those courses and achieve certain qualifications. And that's the focus of our actions around the retraining funding deed. But more generally as a business, we continue to look for opportunities to grow the business and look for other areas of work and continue to provide an environment which we can provide worthwhile work for all of our employees. So there's no individual measure of success around all of that. It's around delivering the particulars that we've contracted with the government through the deed, but then also our general business as usual about providing an environment, as I say, which there's worthwhile work for as many workers as possible.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Just doing the maths on 100 million and 6,000 employees.
Well, that 6,000 of those are identified as the eligible workforce. There is another component, which we don't have a number to, which may be impacted by the NBN Co, who would also be caught under this under the deed.
Interested to ask them whether they wanted a slice of 100 million. But anyway,
but how does that? But I don't understand. Sorry, you've got an AEW, and in response to questioning earlier, you'd indicated that AEW, the volume would stay constant or relatively constant. So who's this other group of employees? What other competencies what type of group of employees would be in addition to that?
I think that there's provision within the deed that recognises there might be other groups outside of that eligible group, and therefore there's capacity to bring them into the retraining funding deed if they're identified as being impacted by the NBN.
Okay, so you've said there are 6,000. Sorry, this is your fault. You identified 6,000. How many?
6,500.
6,500, fair enough. And I stand corrected on that. How many more? Because, we need these figures, obviously, for the report.
That number is
How many
known.
more?
That number is not known, and it's not specified. There's just an acknowledgement that there may be more, and therefore they should have access to the retraining under the deed.
Okay, any
Because my
material...
rough maths is it's about 80,000 ahead. That's a lot of money for a retraining per head.
Well, I can't argue with the maths, Chair.
Well, you can plenty do. I wasn't good at it.
But Mr. Shaw, if there are any changes to the information that we need to have, like we are, I understand the limitations that present themselves to your organisation or the corporation, but we do need to, we need to be able to prepare a report that's based on all,
That's the
the
good
best.
spend of money or not.
Yeah.
No, I accept
It's
that.
less about Telstra. It's more we're questioning taxpayers' money and everything goes
thoroughly
with it.
understand where you're coming from. All I can say is that there's this category identified, but not yet specified in terms of who that may or may not be.
Are we talking hundreds or thousands, or?
I think it's almost impossible to say. I mean, I suppose
It'd be less than 32,000.
Well, to pose a hypothetical, I mean, and I might pose it in slightly ridiculous terms, but at least it sort of gets the point across.
20 past 9.
You know, if everything transitioned to the NBN and Telstra had no customers, or a very small number of customers as a result, there would obviously be then an additional group of employees outside those who actually work directly on the network who would be impacted then by the NBN. And I think it's that notion that's intended to be captured by that. So whilst it might depend on other factors other than how many customers we get, it's intended to reflect that, I suppose at a time of very significant change for our business, and at a time when we can't actually predict 7 or 8 years into the future.
There's danger money built into it.
There may be other employees who are impacted in addition to those that we can see now.
Which we think is a good thing because...
absolutely.
Yeah.
But the type of employees that you imagine would be covered, like these type of people that might be affected, what type of roles do they currently hold? Just broadly, I'm not wanting specifics.
There could be customer staff working in call centres or in various other sorts of areas. It really could be any sort of staff who are impacted by that, to be honest.
Okay, but the chair then asked...
So why are my friends from Lismore in?
Exactly, that's what I was going to get to.
Because, as I think I pointed out to you before, Chair, the issues that drove us around Lismore more around reduction in the number of calls coming in front of the house because we reduced our complaints, we got our service better, the increase in the number of people dealing with us online rather than over the phone. So we just got a substantial reduction in the number of calls coming into front of house as a consequence of business improvements.
They specifically have to be, you have to build a case that it's NBN.
It's related to the NBN, yes.
Precisely. The redundancy has to be related to the NBN rollout.
Less complaints? Well, it's funny. Yeah, okay. All right, you got any more?
No. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for giving us another 25 minutes and thanks for waiting 25 minutes for us to turn up after the votes. It is appreciated and very conscious that it happened last time as well. So I appreciate your understanding, I hope. There was a couple of questions on notice. If we could get those back by 9th of November is what the Secretariat's telling me. And if you're okay, if there's any further questions from members who weren't here or from Ed, then if you could get a response
actually
as
can I just ask something?
quickly as possible.
Just very quickly, very quickly. Your velocity network is fantastic, 100 megabits per second. This is going to be interesting, Chair, just in terms of NBN Go. The actual ability to access that 100 megabits per second is dependent on the router that customers are entitled to obtain when they sign a package up there. Is that correct? That they can access the full 100 megabits per second download in their home is dependent on the type of router and the capability of that router that you provide as part of the package, correct?
I'm not certain on that, Mr. Hughes. You might have to take that on notice. I'm not sure whether it's the router or whether it's within the network, the way we provision the service within the network.
No, it's not the network. It's within the premises, within customer premises.
You're answering your own question.
My understanding is it's the capability of the router.
Okay, but if you take it on notice, and that'll either
That's
confirm...
it, no more curveballs. I'm not...
So we're wanting to report to the Parliament by the 29th of November. So if there can be a turnaround on some of those questions of notice, that would be greatly appreciated. Can I ask a member, that would be you, Ed, to move that the information tabled by NBN Co Limited be received and included in the committee's records as an exhibit for the fourth review. And is it the wish of the committee to authorise for publication, including publication on the parliamentary database?
Yep.
The proof of the transcript of evidence given before it at the public hearing today. No objections are resolved. Thank you, colleague, and all witnesses for time today, and declare this public meeting closed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.